I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in on Palmer, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome to Morning Glory. It's Monday morning. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 6. And my goodness me, what a start to the week we've got. We're going to start with a bang. It's Keir Starmer is going over to Brussels today. He's travelling in the wrong direction, in my view. He should be going over to America to see Donald Trump. But, of course, Donald Trump hasn't invited him yet. So instead he's going the other way to see Emmanuel Macron, who's going to spend most of the day telling him that Brexit has been a complete failure. You're going to have to try and come back into the EU via the back door. Starmer's going to go along with it and say, oh, let's reset the Brexit referendum scenario. Let's make a different deal. Let's get closer and closer to you. Well, I would recommend against doing that, because you know what's going to happen? Donald Trump is more than likely to actually put tariffs on the European Union, and we, because we're not in it, won't suffer from that if we do it right. 0344 499 1000. I've got Reem Ibrahim here this morning. Very, very good to see you, Reem.
Hello,
lovely to have you back, and we've got lots to get through because there's all sorts of weird stories in the papers. I mean, there's a new book out about Starmer, for a start, in which it would appear to suggest that he's not even in charge of the country. Apparently they've said to him he thinks he's the train driver, but actually he's the guy on the Docklands Light Railway who sits up the front, who's just there to make sure nothing terrible happens. But basically he's not driving it at all. Also, we'll be talking about self-healing roads. Sounds a bit like growing concrete. We'll also be talking about railways. Network Rail apparently have stopped using the word passenger. They don't want to call passengers passengers anymore. I don't want to call them, but it's something to do with inclusivity. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk about illegal migrants because they can now become UK citizens. Labour have changed the rules, which would have meant that if you came here illegally, you could never, ever become a UK citizen. That's all going down the Swanee. Also, cats are on the agenda because the SNP up in Scotland, as if they haven't gone mad enough up there, they want to ban cats altogether. If you've forgotten how to get in touch, have a listen to this.
Morning, mate. Calling from Ayrshire here.
Morning, Mike. I'm fuming this morning.
Morning, Mike. Simon in North Wales.
Hi, Mike. Jane from Kidderminster here.
Disregarding Starmer the farmer, I see you swan off again. Just get your ass back here and do your job.
Yeah, well, I'm afraid on Starmer's travels, it's off to Brussels today. I'm not sure what time he's leaving, but we'll keep in touch with you and let you know. You can, of course, send us a voice note, 0344 499 1000. Text us on 87222. This is, of course, Morning Glory. Let's get it on. And here we are, back in the room. 5 minutes past 6. Reem, how nice to see you.
Hello, it's so
Feels
good
like
to
a
see
very
you,
long
Mike.
time since I've seen you.
Has.
But thank you so much for getting up so early. Very kind of you.
I was saying only Mike Graham could get me out of bed at 4 a.m.
Yeah, well, it's absolutely true. A lot of people are getting out of bed. A lot of people just turn the radio on and listen because they don't want to miss a second of it. We kick off at 6 o'clock every morning and we're here until 10 o'clock as well. 4 hours, 4 glorious hours of all manner of fun and capers and all sorts of things. But, I mean, there's a lot going on today. I don't know how much of the weekend you were able to read all of the stuff in the Sunday Times about Keir Starmer, but it's a very strange picture that they're painting of. There's a new book that's been put out, Gabriel Pogren from the Sunday Times, one of the authors of it. And they talk about, you know, Starmer's kind of weirdness and about how he always wanted to be leader of the Labour Party, didn't know why. You know, he doesn't really have any ideology at all. He doesn't really feel particularly driven by any great need to change the country politically. He's not, in fact, they more or less describe him as not really a politician, a kind of HR manager.
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's also reported in the Mail today, and they kind of basically describe him as a bit of a HR manager, I think is really the way to put it. It's also interesting because they sort of talk about his personality and the way that he is, the way that he talks with people, the way that he behaves in the workplace, and that kind of thing. And I think it is really interesting. It does make him seem quite sort of unsociable, as though he doesn't really know how to talk to other people, and it does make him feel a little bit less popular. I mean, he already feels quite stale, I think as somebody that watches him on television. I've never met him in person. He comes across as quite stale, a bit like a statesman, and of course a bit like a lawyer, and this book particularly paints him in that way.
I've only met him once, and he is very, very sort of strange, I would say. It's the best word I can use to describe him. And I made a little quip to him, and he just kind of looked at me like he didn't quite understand what I meant. And it was kind of like, this was nothing going on behind the eyes kind of look, you know. But I mean, it's quite humiliating, and they say it, humiliation for Prime Minister, because many people now inside the Labour Party are saying he's not capable of running a bath. And they've worked out that the reason that the government is so unpopular is probably because of him.
Yeah, it's interesting. So that's the headline in the Mail on page 7. Humiliation for PM as allies say he's incapable of running a bath. I think it's really interesting. A lot of it is coming from Morgan McSweeney, who is, of course, the former advisor that ended up...
He's the sort of kingmaker figure, isn't he?
Yes, yeah. He's sort of the chief of staff that apparently reported all of this stuff, and, of course, had that infamous spat with... Sue Gray in Number 10, and of course apparently it created quite a hostile work environment.
Well, that's another thing. I mean, I was reading that piece yesterday evening, and my God, it sounded like the worst place in the world to work. I mean, I've been in those kind of toxic workplaces in Fleet Street and stuff, where you walk in the morning and people are literally trying to kill each other, you know, trying to stab each other in the back and, you know, mess up what they do. It's quite remarkable.
It is, and it does sound like he is, really, Keir Starmer has basically overseen all of this. There was some really interesting stuff, really interesting quotes. Like a manager, not a leader. I'm in two minds about Keir. The plus side is he's intelligent, decent. He's not Ed Miliband or Neil Kinnock. He's not a nutcase like Gordon Brown.
Yeah, that's from Tony Blair. I love that. He's still calling Gordon Brown a nutcase.
Still calling him that. But he's not John Smith either. I mean, he's like John Smith, but without his class. He's basically a London human rights lawyer who's not in touch with the people, perceived as an over-smooth lawyer-like person. Too soft, not tough enough, inexperienced.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting, especially the kind of weak characterisation in the book specifically. I mean, some of these quotes are quite scathing, and actually it does paint him as a picture as kind of a very weak leader, somebody who's incapable of leading the party itself, but also ultimately the country.
Yeah, and I wonder if a lot of the criticism of him is coming from behind the scenes from Angela Rayner's people, because mysteriously and miraculously, she comes out of it all quite good. She comes out of it quite well, you know, like he tried to fire her, he couldn't fire her. Remember that time when she was being briefed that she'd been fired as Deputy Prime Minister, or Deputy Leader, sorry, after the Hartlepool by-election in, I think it was 2020, was it? And then suddenly she wasn't, not only was she not fired, but she had 3 more jobs, because she's got all this kind of union power behind her, and she really appears to be quite a manipulative type of woman.
So I think with Angela Rayner specifically, it is the union power. It is the fact that the majority of Labour Party finances come from unions. Angela Rayner has a huge amount of power within that sphere. The unions respect her a lot, and they like her a lot, and they kind of of see her, I suppose, as a bit of their own puppet in that respect.
Yeah.
I think if Sir Keir Starmer is going to be worried about anybody, it should probably be Wes Streeting.
Yeah.
He's got quite a lot of support within the Labour Party. I've heard rumours that he sort of goes round, all the different bars within Parliament trying to gain support from other Labour members of Parliament. I think in some ways...
Starmer?
As in Wes Streeting
Wes Streeting, yeah.
I think just in case, in case things happen, Wes Streeting has incentive to want to come across as popular. Right. But as the Health Secretary, he has made quite a few bold statements. Yeah. And I think that what's interesting is he comes across as very, very different to Keir Starmer in that Sir Keir Starmer comes across as a stale manager, not a leader. Yeah. Wes Streeting, I think, is actually a lot more charismatic.
Oh, he is.
And I think he has a bit more... I mean, it's a little bit scary.
But he's been a bit disappointing, I think, since he's been in charge of health. He hasn't really done all the things that he said he was going to do, like a lot of the people in government. He's just kind of gone, oh, well, we'll put that one to the back burner, that one over there, And the problem for Starmer as well, he's away so much. I mean, he's away again in Brussels today. Front page of the Times has got him going to be given a bit of a lesson from Emmanuel Macron. French tell UK to eat humble pie on breakfast, and the Prime Minister will be the first to attend an EU dinner in 5 years. Well, that tells you all you need to know. I mean, you're from the Institute of Economic Affairs. You must be a bit alarmed about this cozying up to Europe business.
It's interesting. So for the Institute of Economic Affairs newsletter this week that came out yesterday, I wrote an intro essay about Brexit, and obviously it's been 5 years since we left the European Union. What has actually happened and what we can actually do to take full advantage of those Brexit freedoms. It's absolutely unequivocally clear to me that somebody like Sir Keir Starmer doesn't want to do all of those things that I outlined. Yeah. But there are so many different regulations that we can cut. And we've got a huge number, I think about 19,000 regulations that are as a result of EU directives. Talking about the fact that in work we're not allowed to work any longer than 48 hours or at least be paid for any work at more than 48 hours.
This is the thing. I mean, loads of these European directives are still in place, aren't they?
Yeah, they're on place. I mean, directives are basically... the directives have caused all of these regulations to occur in the UK, and we've not repealed any of them. One of my favourite examples of things that we've not done post-Brexit is Moroccan tomatoes. So I'm half Moroccan. Yeah. We currently impose tariffs and quotas on Moroccan tomatoes, making them more expensive for British consumers. Yeah. So the reason why your tomatoes are so expensive in those shops is the majority of them come from Morocco, but the UK government still imposes tariffs and quotas. Right. The only reason why we do that...
Oh, sorry, I thought the EU was against tariffs.
Well... No, they're not.
No, I know.
You're very funny, Mike. The only reason why we do that is to protect Spanish growers.
Yes.
It's to protect Spanish growers of tomatoes. And even though Morocco are our largest importers of
And the Spanish
tomatoes,
love us so much that they want us to stop buying houses in Spain, or they want to tax us at 100% if we do.
They do, and we're being so kind to them because we're still imposing tariffs and quotas on Moroccan tomatoes in order to protect them. So, I mean, it's one example. I would say it's low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, very good.
See what you did there. In terms of one of our Brexit freedoms, but it's a really good example of completely pointless stuff that we've just not bothered to change.
Also, we had a guy who rang in last week who said to us, he's a businessman up in the north of England, and he says ever since Brexit happened 5 years ago, it hasn't changed his business at all. He's been perfectly happy exporting stuff to the EU. But as of, I think, last Friday, there's a new law that kicked in, thanks to the Labour government, which means that he now has to fill in a load of paperwork. So they've actually now made it more complicated. Yeah. And when you see people like, I mean, I don't know if we've got it, we haven't got it yet, but we had Davey at the weekend talking over Laura Kunsberg's show about how we need to get closer alignment with the EU, making absolutely no sense, gobbledygook about, you know, how much better off we'd be if we were in the EU. And she pointed out to him, and she's hardly, you know, the world's greatest Brexiteer, she pointed out to him, yeah, but have a look at their growth and their economies. Actually, Germany is a negative, you know, France is pretty much flatlining. There is no country in Europe doing any better than Britain is at this moment. So who's to say that Brexit was a bad thing?
No, Brexit absolutely wasn't a bad thing. And let's be very clear about the economics of this. The difference between UK imports and EU imports and UK exports and EU imports is basically negligible. Right. So there has basically been no real economic disaster. All of this kind of Project Fear nonsense a lot of people have been talking about over the last 5 years did not happen. The UK is not in any worse of a position now than it was within the European Union. However, now we have created loads of levers that just need to be pulled. There are so many things that we could be doing that would make Brexit, not just Brexit a success, but make the United Kingdom as a whole a success that we are not doing.
But Starmer's not going to pull those levers, is he? Because he's gone over there basically to be told off by Emmanuel Macron and to, you know, remember the last time they were together on that ridiculous tank driving through Paris, like they just conquered it.
Yeah, it was particularly strange optics, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, this is front page of the Times. So the title is French Tell UK to Eat Humble Pie on Brexit. I think it's interesting because Sir Keir Starmer definitely doesn't have the same attitude that I suppose I have towards Brexit, which is that, you know, there are all of these opportunities that we could be seizing. Yeah. It seems as though what he actually wants to try and cosy up to the EU, and instead what's actually going to happen is they're going to tell him, look, you know, just admit Brexit wasn't the success that you hoped it would be.
Yes.
And I think that we should absolutely do the complete opposite. I mean, who is our biggest trading partner? It's the United States.
United States, exactly.
I think that the one golden ticket that would be the sort of the one golden prize that Brexit could give us is a free trade agreement with the United States.
With the United States, exactly right.
Now, of course, that depends on what they do.
Right.
There are so many things that we can do that we aren't doing. So we could, again, slash all of those regulations. REACH is one of them.
Yeah.
So the something to do with chemicals, basically. It means that we have to go through all of this animal testing with chemicals.
Yeah.
It costs the UK economy billions, costs the chemical industry absolutely huge amounts of money. We could also scrap VAT on a lot of things. You know, there are so many things that we could be doing as a result of Brexit that we aren't doing. So basically what we've done is we've remained out of the European Union. Yes, that is him in the tank.
I mean, I wonder if they're going to get the tank out for today's visit to Brussels and just have him driving around in it.
I think they've realised it looked quite bad.
It really does. We've got a clip actually from Donald Trump, and this is from last night, talking about possible tariffs for Britain and the EU.
Prime Minister Starmer has been very nice. We've had a couple of meetings. We've had numerous phone calls. We're getting along very well. And we'll see whether or not we can balance out our budget. With the European Union, it's $350 billion deficit. So obviously something's going to take place there.
Yeah, he's not keen on the EU at all, which is quite good news. Also, Starmer this weekend had a guest at Chequers. Guess who it was? Olaf Scholz, the German leader. So he's now cozying up to the Germans as well, just before he goes to Brussels. So he's got all his ducks in a row. No doubt Scholz will have been telling him. And he's not much longer for this world in terms of running Germany because, you know, they're about to be taken over by the right wing, aren't they?
Yes. So Olaf Scholz is the German Chancellor. I think it's interesting because there does seem to be a bit of internal politics domestically in the European Union. Things are going terribly within Europe. I must be very clear about this.
Absolutely.
The EU have basically gone down an even more over-regulatory, overly taxed sort of path. And the UK, I mean, things are pretty bad in the UK, but things are absolutely worse in the EU.
They're a lot worse there, yeah. And their immigration problems are worse than ours, even though ours are pretty bad. I mean, theirs are even worse.
Theirs are even worse. I think what's really interesting is actually the way that they've set up their institutions means that they probably can get away with a lot of this stuff. So France, for example, I mean, they are much more likely to build more houses. They have a much more liberal regulatory system, which means that they actually can survive this kind of stuff. Whereas other countries in Europe aren't able to do that. I mean, Germany really is now the new sick man of Europe. Now that we've left, I think what's interesting about the Trump clip, Donald Trump effectively saying that he's going to impose all of these global tariffs, I think is a bad thing, right? It's trade wars, it's politics, but let's be very clear, trade wars like this only end up hurting consumers. If he imposes global tariffs, it will hurt Americans. It will make Americans
not necessarily. We disagree on that, but we'll come back to that because we'll have a row about it in a minute. Because there's lots to do. We've got to stop for a moment. We're also going to ask the question: has Sir Keir Starmer broken COVID rules? Because that's a question that's being asked now all over Britain. Because it looks as though he had a voice coach into Downing Street, or into Labour Party headquarters, I should say, back in 2020, when we were supposed to be in Tier 4. Remember all those tiers that we had? We'll talk about that, plus a lot more. Ria Ibrahim is here for the IEA. This is Morning Glory. We'll see you after this. this is the police, right? And they've got the blue lights on. They're chasing this woman who's in a wheelchair. Right?
It's 2 miles an hour.
You can hear the siren, right?
That is brilliant.
Literally, the best thing about it is, right, they cut her up and she goes round them. What's that?
That is brilliant.
They tried to cut her up again, and she goes round on the other side, goes round the back. They stayed in the car. She's doing like 3
probably
miles
because the
an
police
hour.
officers are so fat they probably couldn't run after.
No, it's a shoplifting
She's still at
thing.
it. Look, she's still
She's
at it.
going. Yeah, I know, amazing. Absolutely
She's
amazing.
reached Leeds, by the way.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 22 minutes past 6. I'm here with Ibrahim from the IEA. We're talking about all manner of things. So far, it's all been a bit political. Don't worry, we've got plenty of other stories to look at as well about also when life hits the peak. I'm afraid for me, it's all in the past, but I think for Reem, it's all in the future. Apparently, it says you hit your peak at 45.
Oh, wonderful.
So you've got something to look forward to. Also, I've got another story for you, which is going to be about why women talk more than men, but I'll run that one past you in a moment. First of all, let's get a voice note from Jonathan on Keir Starmer.
Mike, this is Jonathan here. I hear that Two-Tier Keir is on his travels again. He's in France today. He's been to the States, he's been to Ukraine, he's been to Germany. But one place he hasn't been to is the Bermuda Triangle. Pity he doesn't get on a plane there and take his whole cabinet with him.
That would be good. The voice notes we get on this show are absolutely brilliant. What a good idea. The Bermuda Triangle. I wonder if people go in and don't come back out again. Let's talk about this COVID problem that he's got, though, right? Because we've got, I think it's Richard Holden coming on a little bit later on, used to be chair of the Conservative Party. He's written a letter to Keir Starmer asking him specifically a series of questions about this revelation that came out again in this book, the Sunday Times book at the weekend, in which basically, I think the book is called Get In, isn't it? And it's written by Patrick Maguire and Gabriel Pogrund, reported in the Sunday Times. Basically, Richard Holden's written to the Prime Minister asking about this incident that supposedly happened on Christmas Eve 2020, where he supposedly, and this is the funniest part of the story actually, wanted a voice coach. I mean, to get the voice coach to teach him to talk about fixing the foundations. I mean, that takes some doing.
It's because he sounds like Kermit the Frog.
Yeah, did he get Kermit the Frog in? No, apparently it was a woman called Leonie Mellinger. She's the one who's responsible for him.
Did you see a picture of her?
Yeah,
she was
wearing a mask.
A selfie of her.
There it is.
There, we've got the picture.
That's her supposedly entering Labour Party headquarters on Christmas Eve.
And you know what really annoys me is the background. By the strength of, it's just mental, the communities and all this stuff. I have my glass, I can't read. Oh, there we go. By the strength of our common endeavour, we achieve more than we achieve alone. It's just insane, and it's sort of a bit Soviet, if you ask me. It is a bit,
isn't it? Yeah. It's a bit North Korean.
It is a bit North Korean. But what's really interesting is she was allowed key worker status.
Yes.
Because
and this is where I think you'll get caught out, because I think Labour so far have issued a statement saying that no COVID rules were broken. However, that's easy for them to say. If she was given key worker status when she shouldn't have been, which I think is probably going to end up being the case, then she broke the Tier 4 restrictions, because according to the Tier 4 restrictions, you're not allowed to travel to a work venue unless it's absolutely necessary. Now, you can call me old-fashioned, but I don't think having a voice coach is absolutely necessary.
No, and also absolutely could have happened over Zoom, right? I mean, that's the point. And what really is upsetting about this story, and I know that it's funny and hilarious when we can talk about it, but actually a lot of people across the country have had their lives entirely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic.
They couldn't see their relatives at Christmas. They couldn't see their children at Christmas. They couldn't see their animals at Christmas. They couldn't see their elderly parents sometimes. I mean, and a lot of people on social media at the moment using that picture of the Queen, if you remember, sitting in the Windsor Chapel at the funeral of her husband, and they've said, what a shame she didn't know she could have brought her voice coach with her.
Exactly. She could have broken the rules and it would have been fine. Yeah, it's that photo
such a haunting image, that, isn't it?
And actually, I mean, so many people have had different stories of this.
So ridiculous as well when you think back.
Yeah, it's
wasn't
insane. And also, I mean, there is, let's be very clear about this, for someone like the Queen, who is a lot older, I suppose there is a higher risk of catching COVID and obviously affecting you.
Yeah, but the mask wouldn't stop it, I'm afraid.
The mask wouldn't stop it, and it means that she wasn't even able to properly grieve at her own husband's funeral. It's so sad.
I know.
My great uncle passed away during the pandemic, and I wasn't able to see him in the preceding month. So, you know, these are stories that have happened across the country.
Of course, and everybody's got them. And if it turns out that Keir Starmer once again has been a hypocrite, then he's in real trouble. Have a look at what he said back at that time.
It's very important that whatever the rules are, everybody follows them. So I say follow the government advice. Whatever tier you're in, follow the rules. It's very important that we all say that, the government and the opposition. Whenever you have a tiered system, you'll have different rules in different parts of the UK. It makes it more confusing. But I think overall, the public will be saying, just when we want certainty, just when we want leadership, we've got inconsistency, confusion.
Did he say a tiered system there? Two-tier
Keir. I mean,
apparently he thought COVID rules didn't apply to him, perhaps.
This is the problem, is that it is one rule for politicians, one rule for the people that make the decisions about these rules, and it's one rule for us. I mean, I think most people can genuinely... I think Keir Starmer will be able to look people in the eye that have lost family members during the lockdowns and be able to say, you know, yes, I had my voice coach with me, you know, actually genuinely admitting to these fundamental failures. When we're under Tier 4, we literally were not allowed to leave the house at all. It was properly strict lockdowns. I mean, honestly, it's quite haunting thinking about it.
I mean, I think most people, I'm certainly one of them, I've kind of forgotten all of it. You kind of deliberately, it's like childbirth. I mean, allegedly, I've never obviously given birth to a child, but, you know, women forget famously about childbirth altogether in order to get pregnant again, because it's such a horrible experience. I think it's the same here. You forget about what actually happened.
Yeah, we've all forgotten about how absolutely awful the pandemic was, but unfortunately for a lot of people, they haven't forgotten, and their lives have been affected by, I mean, so many children that are now behind in school as a result of basically having 2 years of inadequate learning. And what's really, so I was a part-time teacher at the time during lockdown whilst I was a student, and I would teach children with special educational needs. With a couple of children that they were either on the ASD spectrum, the autism spectrum, or they were dyslexic or dyspraxic or whatever it was, or had dyscalculia, a lot of these different learning disabilities, which basically meant that they were unable to work via Zoom. It just didn't work for them. And from so many of those children in particular, under Tier 4 restrictions, a lot of them weren't able to go into school. So some of them were during other lockdown measures. A lot of them weren't able to go into school during Tier 4.
So much of it was unnecessary. That's the thing that we now know. And they're all agreeing now that they were unnecessary.
Yes.
You know?
Actually, the IEA published a paper, I think, a year and a half ago, you know, what was the verdict on lockdowns and how much it actually affect. We had a 3.2% difference in mortality rates compared to Sweden. Sweden didn't lock down at all. So, I mean, again, 3.2% difference in mortality rates. That is absolutely negligible. Basically, all of the lockdowns were entirely pointless when it comes to statistics. Obviously, those 3.2% of people, it's great that they're alive today and it's wonderful. That being said, we're thinking about all of the social and economic costs.
Yeah, but since then, we know many more people have died as a result of the lockdowns than actually died because of COVID. We know that. Let's talk about something slightly stranger. Up in Scotland, right? This is the SNP apparently thinking about banning cats. According to a story in the Mail, households in Scotland may soon be banned from getting a cat under extraordinary plans being considered to protect the country's wildlife, as apparently cats eat birds.
I love how you introduced this story when you said it as if they've not gone already quite nuts up there.
Yeah, I know. I mean, this is an animal welfare body called the Animal Welfare Commission, right? And basically one of the options that they are considering is banning cat ownership in some parts of Scotland where wildlife is most at risk. I mean, hello? Are they going to ban things that eat cats? Are they going to, you know, ban... Sorry, there's obviously a joke there about illegal migrants in America. Are they going to ban... Are they going to ban foxes? Because foxes can sometimes eat cats.
Or are they going to ban cars? Because
wolves.
they sometimes run over animals.
Yeah.
So we're going to ban
Probably.
cars.
Well, of course they're going to ban cars.
Ban cars, ban cats, ban dogs, because sometimes they are quite aggressive towards other animals. So actually, I just think we should all just stay in a box.
Yeah, stay in a box.
And
15-minute cities, you know. Don't get a car. Just cycle everywhere. They're basing it. Apparently, Australia. We've discovered this during COVID. Actually, Australia's quite a harsh country when it comes to diminishing people's rights. Apparently, in some parts of Australia, there are already cat containment areas where cats are not allowed outside. If you have a cat, you have to keep it indoors.
Australia are quite authoritarian.
They really
some
are.
Of their measures.
I once had a cat in New York who didn't go outside, and then we lived in a flat for like years and years and years, and then we finally bought an apartment with a garden. And the cat was the strangest thing watching it going outside. It was putting its foot on earth for the first time. It was like, oh, this is a bit weird. I'm not sure I like this. Yeah, but I mean, they've gone completely bonkers in Scotland, haven't they?
Yeah, that's absolutely insane. I mean, it's so interesting because there's so much discontent, I think, in Scotland itself with the way in which the conversations about Europe have happened. And obviously, they had the referendum in 2014 and how that all happened. Nicola Sturgeon, I think, was one of the most political party leaders I think that we've ever seen.
And what a fall from grace for her as well.
Oh, entirely.
I mean, she's now just a joke figure, isn't she?
She's just a joke figure. She's absolutely a clown. But what's really interesting is how she's remembered today, and actually the reason for her downfall is that she wanted men, a male rapist, in women's prisons.
Yeah, until she realised it was a bad idea. And I still love that final interview that she did to ITV in Scotland.
I was wrong.
No, the one where she went... Yeah, so when the guy said to her, so what you're saying is there are circumstances under which men with penises cannot be women. And she went, yeah. And then she realised what she said, and it was kind of like this...
She said, oh, no.
She was kind of like, oh, there goes my career.
She realised all of those trans activists were going to come after her after that interview. That's what happened.
Yeah.
Because when you pander to these people, when you pander to this kind of illogical chain of arguments, you absolutely have to go all the way.
Yeah.
And you realise halfway through, hold on, this actually makes absolutely no sense. In no way, and no matter what your view is on LGBT issues, there is no way having a man with a penis is, I don't know if it's is appropriate language for this time,
I
this
think
time
it's
in the
fine.
morning.
Don't worry about it.
A man with male genitalia at in a female prison where they are absolutely capable of hurting those women.
It makes no sense at all. It's completely insane. As indeed is the next story we're going to tell you about in a moment, which is all about the railways, who apparently don't want you to use the word passenger anymore. Pretty soon they'll just do away with the trains and have a railway system that nobody uses. Let's get a voice note from James on Starmer.
Good morning, Mike. Starmer should be ditching the EU and should be doing a trade deal with America. Trump is a superb businessman and looks after his own country. He should be embracing Trump, but he won't. He'll suck up to those European cracks once again. Cheers, Mike.
Well done, James. Thank you very much indeed. One from Neil. He says, the Prime Minister abroad again? Who have we got running the country? Phileas Fogg. Well, he might as well be. It's certainly not Starmer. Even if you ask people in the Labour Party, they say it's not him. As I said earlier, they've likened him to the guy who sits at the front of the DLR, which, if you haven't been to London, is a driverless train which runs on a monorail between places like Canary Wharf, City Airport, Bank Station, that kind of thing. But they always have a driver that sits there just in case. But he's not actually driving the train. Just imagine. You could, I mean, maybe we could mock him up as a guy with this little Thomas the Tank Engine hat on. And he's just sitting there going, oh, I'm driving a train. But you're not actually, Keir. It's being controlled by a robot. Oh, sorry, no, that's you. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:36. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Keir Starmer's off to Brussels today to be told that Brexit doesn't work and that he must do something different. He's going to be the first Prime Minister in 5 years to attend an EU dinner. Let's get a voice note from Richard.
Good morning, Mark. Richard in Corby. On the export paperwork with the government, I do export, and they've brought in more forms to fill in, which is totally ridiculous because they have all the information, then they want it again. But we were told by the export office last week that we might have to do a 1-hour tutorial on the new paperwork, and I thought that doesn't sound good. You know, if you need a tutorial, it's going to be onerous and it's going to be loads of it and it's going to be a waste of everyone's time, but that's Labour for you. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's what we were hearing last week. Reem Ibrahim's here from IEA. Richard, they're saying that, you know, they have brought in more paperwork. Why? What the hell have they done that for?
A lot, yeah. I mean, this is all the cost of regulation, right? And this is
no, but I mean, this is 5 years on.
Yeah.
Why are they bringing in more paperwork when they should be bringing in less paperwork? Surely.
Well, this is the point. A lot of this is to do with the fact that the government effectively want businesses to. A lot of it is in the name of health and safety. A lot of it is them saying this is to protect workers or this is to protect.
Oh, so this is
employees.
part of the workers' rights nonsense, probably.
Potentially. Well, the workers' rights bill hasn't been passed yet, but that definitely will have huge swathes of regulation and red tape for these businesses. And what's really interesting is that as you add new regulations for businesses, it makes it much harder for smaller companies to enter the market.
Right.
But larger companies, they can absorb these costs very easily. So you'll often get really big companies saying, oh, we welcome the government's new regulations on health and safety. When
they've got an entire department that deals with it.
Exactly. They've got an entire department that deals with it. They've got entire staff members that deal with this kind of regulation. If you're a smaller company, you're going to find it much harder to absorb those regulatory costs. So actually, the larger companies often end up saying, well done, government, for introducing this new health and safety regulation, when actually it's the smaller companies that suffer.
Yeah, it's a bit like Angela Rayner when she appeared on a TV show. I remember once, I think it was on the BBC, it might have been Laura Kunsberg, and they were asking her, well, can you name any companies that actually are willing to welcome your, you know, workers' rights charter? Oh yeah, she said, we've got loads of them. And well, can you name one? Yeah, there's lots of them, absolutely hundreds of them. And she could not name one firm, whereas there was a group of other firms who had written a letter, an open letter to her to say, you know, if you do this is going to really strangle business and it's going to cripple our economy, la 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 la. And they all had their company names on the letter, and she couldn't come back with one. But let's go to Ed Davey. He's a man that's often able to explain things really, really well when he wants to know what we should be doing with the European Union. Here he was on the BBC yesterday.
Your argument when you sat down was that if we join, we will grow more quickly than we are. And the evidence from what's happening in the EU at the moment is they're not growing more quickly than we are. Spain, as you say, some countries are doing better, but the average is 0.1%.
No, but that's the whole point of trade deals, so you can get more growth on both sides. So even if the economy isn't growing at the moment, it's more reason they should have a trade deal. So I'm afraid you're playing into my own argument that a UK-EU customs union would help us, and it would be relatively easy to get, because it's beneficial for our European friends as well.
We already have a free trade deal with the European Union.
What's he talking about? He's talking absolute rubbish. He's a Lib Dem leader, right? He's a leader of a political party, and he kept saying to Laura Kunsberg every time she countered him with a good point, you're playing into my hands. Well, no, you're not. And she's actually saying that your argument's completely useless.
Insane. It's insane to basically say, well, actually, if they're doing really economically badly and we're doing economically badly, what we need to do is trade with one another. Now, free trade is good, right?
Yeah.
Free trade is an absolutely brilliant thing.
Yeah.
We already have a free trade agreement with the European Union. And actually, what's really important to note is that our largest trading partner for both goods and services is the United States.
America, yeah.
So no matter what your perspective is on whether or not you like American goods, you buy them, right?
Yes.
As consumers, you buy them. You might not know that they're American. You don't need to know that they're American, but they're produced over there. Now, the reason why free trade is so important is because there are goods in other countries that are more efficiently produced, which means that your groceries are cheaper in the United Kingdom because we can't produce everything. Now, that's the benefit of free trade.
But the reason why Trump wants to do what he's doing with places like China, though, is that he believes that they're strangling his ability as a country to actually have an industry, because he's, for example, being particularly good on car making. He's like, if you want to make cars that you sell here, you build them in America, and if you don't, we're going to put a massive big tariff on it, in which case people won't buy those cars. And I think that's a good thing.
No, so I disagree. I think it's a bad thing.
I know you disagree.
So I think that as soon as you add tariffs and quotas to various different goods that are domestically consumed and not domestically produced, it means that you end up increasing the costs, right? So
yeah, but in cars in particular, people can buy American cars which will be then cheaper than the Chinese cars. At the moment, in Europe, for example, the Chinese cars are cheaper, and they are completely wiping out British and European car manufacturers because they can't compete.
They can't compete because they're cheaper. That competition is a good thing, right?
Well, it's not if it's putting people out of work in the home country.
But it's not putting people out of work.
Well, it is. They've just sacked a load of people out of the Vauxhall plant in Luton.
Yes, and those people will be able to do much more efficient work. I mean, ultimately...
In China?
Well, no, not in China, but they'll be able to do other work in the UK. The point is, as soon as you start saying, actually, the government here is going to intervene and say, you know what, domestic car manufacturers
as a general principle,
aren't great in
as a general principle, I would agree with you. But I think in certain situations, it's a good thing to keep cheap labour and slave labour in some cases out of competition in a country where you have to look after your own people. We're not going to go on with that. We're going to go to Network Rail now. We can have this argument another time because it's a good one. Network Rail is sorry to announce the word passenger has been cancelled, right? According to 134 pages of guidance issued to staff by the company that maintains Britain's railways, has said that the word passenger has become too formal. So it doesn't want you to use the word passenger, it doesn't want you to use the word purchase, onboarding, or the phrase rest assured. And this will not come as any great surprise to you, Reem, that this is all about inclusivity and being able to speak to everybody equally. I mean, who is going to be offended by being called a passenger?
Yeah, it's absolutely mental. The guidance also says that pregnant women should now be called pregnant people.
Oh, please.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
A lot of
if you could find a train to actually make an announcement on, that would be good.
That would be good. If you actually get the train on time, that would be excellent as well. What's really interesting is a lot of these... So there's a bit of a chart here in the Telegraph piece. So passengers should be referred to as you.
Yes.
Which I think is even ruder, if you ask me.
Yeah,
Purchase should be referred to as buy.
Right.
Obtain should be referred to as get.
Right.
Mother or father should be referred to as parent. Expectant mother or a pregnant woman should be referred to as a pregnant person. Mankind should be called people. Workmanship, quality of work, this is mental. Manpower, ladies, men, or people. Boyfriend, wife, husband should be called partner or spouse.
So if you're sitting with somebody with either it's the same sex or the opposite sex, and they say, "Is this your partner?" and you say no, how do you get that information and process it? If it's your boyfriend or is it your girlfriend, it's more accurate. Isn't it?
Yeah, of course it's more accurate. This is crazy. These last ones are quite funny. Your normal should be referred to as neurotypical. So, Mike, you're not very neurotypical.
Actually, I'm not. I'm not very normal at all. I'm actually,
you're the opposite of neurotypical.
I rejoice in the fact that I'm not normal.
And this one annoys me. Christian name should be actually called first name or given name.
Yeah.
That's obviously because being Christian is so offensive.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, because people who are not Christian might not like it. Well, I don't think anybody cares.
No.
How about this? They could be beaten, though, by North Devon Council, who have got a recruitment training manual in which they've decided to code 52 masculine coded words and 50 feminine coded words. Feminine terms which are frowned upon include kind, loyal and polite. What are these people doing? Masculine terms to avoid include intellect, lead, principle and ambition.
God.
Employers are also urged not to use terms like years of experience or native English speaker. I mean, where these people
so
come?
Offensive.
It is so ridiculous, isn't it?
I mean, called me old-fashioned, but I like to think of women as being more feminine and as being, you know,
in most cases.
In most cases, not quite with Nicola Sturgeon, but you know, being, you know, I'd like to think of male and female roles in that way.
Yeah.
And I would like, you know, when I'm
surely that's diversity. I mean, they go on and on about diversity all the time, but they don't want you to define the differences between men and women.
Exactly.
How does that
work?
work?
It's not saying that all women are this way or all men are this way,
right.
but it's that this is their traditional role, and I think that's something that this country seems to have entirely forgotten.
Absolutely.
I believe that, generally speaking, when I'm looking for a husband one day, not yet, I'm a bit too young, but when I do eventually look for when I do eventually look for a husband one day, I would like somebody that is stronger than me, that is more of a leader than I am.
Might want somebody who puts shelves up,
exactly,
fix the car, that kind of thing.
That can do sort of the DIY around the house.
I can't do any of those things. I mean, I do more cooking, and you know, whenever I have been married,
you're a bit more feminine and more maternal.
Yeah, I am. Whenever I have been married, it's always the woman who's done all the putting the IKEA bunk beds together, because I'm hopeless at it. I mean, if I did it, looks like some kind of Salvador Dali sculpture.
And it doesn't mean that you're a woman, Mike.
I don't think I'm a woman.
You're not a woman.
But I'm allowed to have different talents.
Exactly.
Which maybe men wouldn't be expected to have.
Exactly. I think that's wonderful.
Very much touches my feminine side. Oh, all sorts of things. Everything from anything Lebanese to Italian to French. I'm very good at it.
I'm going to make you cook for me one day.
I will. I'll do that. Excellent. Now, let's get another voice note from Phil on Starmer's voice coach.
Morning, Mike. Phil from Hertfordshire. Well, Starmer had a voice coach. Well, it didn't work, did it? 3, 2, 1, way!
I mean, people have been saying this all weekend, but if he did have a voice coach, should fire them.
Yeah,
or ask for his money back. Because
I think it must have been
foundations.
It must have been Kermit the Frog.
Maybe it was the voice coach that taught him how to speak like a robot. Maybe it was that way round.
Maybe
he wanted to sound like this.
A part of their grand plan to come across as a lot more statesmanlike, so that they can tell you what to do. Yes, they're going to increase your taxes. Yes, they're going to overregulate businesses. But you know what? It's all being said by a very smart lawyer. So maybe it's all part of their grand strategy.
Yes, which brings us to the next story we'll do, which is about growth and how useless it is. We'll come back to it in a second. We've got to take a little break. This one from Mark in Caterham. Morning, Mark. I just had my train cancelled and the other's running late, so the train companies are right. I'm a mug, not a passenger, for paying £3,120 for this. That's probably his season ticket. It's a joke, isn't it? I mean, never mind 134 pages of gobbledygook. How about you just run the bleeding timetable? This is Talk.
I do worry that, despite the very good will that I hear towards the UK from my friends in Washington, that we could still end up the wrong side of that. And look, as a free trader, and the UK depends on free trade, I worry generally about a world in which there are tariffs and counter-tariffs. But the best way we can try and influence that is to be in the room. And regrettably, the rooms that the Prime Minister seems to want to be in are all in Brussels, not in Washington.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
6:51, welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. Ibrahim is here with us from the Institute of Economic Affairs, making a lot of economic sense, apart from on tariffs, but that's okay, because she's entitled to her view. This is, of course, the land of free speech and the place where people come to talk. Let's get another voice note, because there's a lot of great voice notes this morning. Chris, let's hear from you.
Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Reem. Chris from Epsom here. We should all be very worried about Starmer going over to sit down and have dinner with the EU. They're trying to get us back into the EU via the back door under another name, just trying to disguise it. And if you think about it, all our problems come from the EU when the Commission gave freedom of movement within the Schengen area for illegal immigrants. So they all headed towards Calais. Have a great day.
Yeah, absolutely right. Thank you very much indeed, Chris. This is the problem. You know, Starmer, as I think we've both agreed, should be heading in the opposite direction to go and talk to Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is still playing with him a little bit like a sort of cat with a mouse, where he says he's doing a great job and we're talking and everything's going to be fine, probably, with the UK, but the EU, not so much. You know, he's
I think that's absolutely
with
right. I mean, publicly at least, Trump seems to be quite supportive of Keir Starmer and is saying we've had some great meetings, things are really positive. I think the real point here is that Trump loves the UK more than he cares. Trump loves the UK more than he hates Starmer.
Yes.
And I think that's the point. He won't want to hurt the UK because he loves the UK, and he, obviously his mum loves the Queen, and he always talks about that.
He does.
And how much his family love the royal family. So I think that he loves the UK and wants the UK to do well, and he loves, you know, Nigel Farage more than he hates somebody like Sir Keir Starmer. Yeah. And he can see that Keir Starmer probably was only in for one
Also,
term.
if you think about it, I mean, he's much smarter now, Donald Trump, perhaps, than he was in 2016. It wouldn't make much sense for him to say that Keir Starmer, what an idiot.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
I'm never going to speak to him, because, I mean, there is, whatever anybody says, still a special relationship between Britain and the US.
Exactly. And again, the US is currently our largest trading partner.
Yeah.
So the reason why, and I'll make the point again, free trade works, and the reason why a free trade agreement would be brilliant with the United States is it would remove all tariffs and quotas, which are basically extra taxes on all of the goods that we import from the US.
I don't think he'll put tariffs on us at all. I just don't think he wants to.
No.
Because, as you say, he loves Britain. I mean, Scotch whisky for a start, you know, all the stuff that comes out of Scotland, the salmon that they all buy in America, you know, incredible, you know, cars that we make here that get sold over there, all of that. How about this from Alan in Merseyside? He says, here we go again. The BBC and Sky have started knocking Trump over his sanctions and how polls are saying we should return to the European Union. We are out and staying out for at least 47 years, the same time we were in for, giving governments a chance to get a proper Brexit. Well, that's right. I mean, I don't know what you're doing listening to the BBC and Sky, by the way. I mean, absolutely waste of time. You know, Sky are on the brink of falling over, aren't they?
Same thing that Talk did, right?
Yeah,
with,
exactly.
Getting off of
and everyone was giving us such a hard time, but it's the place to be. Now, one final one for you. There's a couple of other stories we'll get to as well, but I've got to run this one by you, because researchers at the University of Arizona have recorded, finally, the age-old question, right? Who talks more, men or women? And apparently, and I mean, it's difficult between us, because I mean, it's hard for me to defend men for not talking very much, since I talk for 4 hours every day. But basically, according to this research, men spoke on average 11,950 words per day, but women have an average of 13,349. So either you take more words to say what you want to say, or you talk more.
I think it's a bit of both. I am definitely very guilty of being a big talker. when I was younger, I think it's a good thing. And of course, if I was sat here in front of you, Mike, and just sort of remained silent, I don't think you'd ask me back.
That wouldn't really work. No, that wouldn't really work.
But you know, I do think, generally speaking, women do talk more than men.
Yeah.
Women are obviously infamously more gossipy and obviously talk a lot more. I generally think that women take longer to say things. And you know, if you've ever heard a woman and said to a woman, you know, tell me the story about what happened here, and they'll go on huge tangents, go on and talk for ages and ages. But I think it makes for good conversation.
I think so. I mean, I think there are certain women, I would say, who talk too much on the phone. For example, if I speak to my sister about once a week, you know, and I don't want to, I know she watches the show as well, so I don't want to upset her, but occasionally I'm thinking, we've been on the phone for 45 minutes now, can I go now? And it's almost like you just put your hand up and go, can I stop talking now, please? You know, not because I don't love her, because I do, but it's just, you know, just give me a break. I need to go for a lie down. You know. Also, my problem is because I talk so much on here, I don't really want to talk much when I
you go
finish,
off air. Yeah.
You know.
No, I get that. I feel like when you've done a couple of hours on a show, and the longest I've been on air, I think, has been 3 hours.
Right.
And I just after that, I was like, I'm all talked out. I just can't.
Absolutely.
But then I always find my way back, and after.
I don't think you'll ever have nothing to say, really, which is why we love you. Now, how about this? UK Public Service. This is a piece in Times Online. National Audit Office has come out and said this. Again, something we've been saying for a long time. This is a guy called Gareth Davis, who leads the National Audit Office. He said levels of health, education and transport spending are unsustainable and need to be fundamentally reformed. Britain's public services are not good enough and they cost too much. Absolutely right. Yeah, bang on.
But it's,
and apparently one of the reasons...
Sherlock to figure that out?
It didn't, but it's good that at least that somebody in sort of what you might call loosely government is finally admitting that what we're doing cannot be sustainable.
But Mike,
we have to stop.
They always talk about this, but they don't actually do anything about it. And honestly, I believe it when I see it. West Streeting, the health secretary, day after the election in July, said the NHS is broken. I remember seeing it was front pages everywhere, talking about how terrible the NHS is. It's like, yes, anybody that's actually been using the National Health Service knows how terrible it's been.
Yes.
We've had wait lists get up to 8 million. We're spending just below £200 billion a year. And what do they do when they're in government? They spend more money on the NHS,
more money.
and they refuse to actually fundamentally reform it. Do you remember that report by Lord Darcy? Basically saying, yes, we get that the NHS is broken, but we should still keep the model. I say this is absolutely terrible.
The model's broken.
So honestly, I think I'm just so sick of it. I mean, it's good to hear people saying the right stuff and it's acknowledging the problem. But we've been acknowledging the problem for years, and nothing has actually been done.
And one of the biggest problems here is they are saying basically so much of the borrowed money which is coming into the government now is going straight into servicing high rates of interest on government debt, and also paying for so many people who are on benefits currently, which has ballooned in the last 10 years.
Yes, this is a story that I think is really interesting. So Fraser Nelson, the former editor of The Spectator, he did a really great documentary for Channel 4, of all places, basically looking at the Britain's benefits scandal. A tenth of the adult working population are on out-of-work benefits.
I know.
This is absolutely astronomical. More than it's a waste of taxpayer money, there are hard-working Brits that are paying so much in taxes that are going to people that aren't working. But it's also a waste of human potential. These are people that could be working, that could be contributing.
There must be something they can do. Surely we can find something, even for people who say they're too anxious or they're not well enough or they're disabled in some way. There are plenty of disabled people at work. You know, it doesn't prevent you from doing it.
A lot of it is mental health. So more than 63,000 people went from being economically inactive because they were students, this is in the year between 2021 and 2022, because they were students, to then being economically inactive because they were signed off as long-term sick. And what happens is GPs will often just sign them off because they know there's no other way. They're not going to get services on the NHS. They can't afford private healthcare for their mental health. And I do believe, by the way, that a lot of these people genuinely suffer from depression or anxiety. But show me the evidence that the best thing for a depressed person is for them to stay at home.
I know.
So where is the evidence?
There is no evidence for that at all. One final one, and we'll explore this one a little bit later on. Self-healing roads, according to the front page of the Times, could end the plague of potholes. Now, I don't want to remind people too much about this because I know how upset they get, but I did once say that if only concrete would grow as it does, right, you'd have no problems, you know. So now science has finally caught up with my brilliance, right, because now it turns out that we have self-healing roads.
So it turns out concrete can actually grow.
It does, absolutely right. Once again, proved correct. Remy Brim, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. From the Institute of Economic Affairs. We've got loads more coming up, of course, including why is Keir Starmer going to Brussels? What's he running away from? And what's he going to give away while he's there? Exactly what does Emmanuel Macron want from him? And what does everybody else in the European Union want that we've got? He's going to give it away. This is Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. We'll be back after the news.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time.
Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
2 minutes past 7. Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. It's Monday morning, another fabulous week. The first week of February, I suppose. I haven't mentioned that yet. I should countenance that because it's a brand new month. We've managed to get through January. It was pretty miserable for an awful lot of people. It was pretty bad for Keir Starmer. I think his approval rating started at about -35 and now it's about -45. Nobody thinks he's doing a good job. Not even anyone inside of his own party. They've likened him to the man that sits at the front of an automated train thinking that he's driving it when in fact it's actually driving itself. You know, the robot is the man sitting there, and the robot is also the man driving the train. It's incredible stuff. There's a new book out which basically paints the inside of Keir Starmer's head. There's a very weird place indeed. And I'm going to be asking plenty of questions about whether or not he broke the COVID rules, because that's the question that's being put to him by Richard Holden, Conservative MP. We'll be speaking to Richard Holden later on in the show. He's actually put several very pertinent questions to the Prime Minister about whether he got a voice coach to come into Labour Party headquarters on Christmas Eve of 2020 to help refix the foundations. We'll be wondering if he did get a voice coach, was it to make him sound like that, or was it to try and make him sound a bit better? And has the voice coach given a refund for the money that was spent, by the way? Let's get a message, though, from Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, on what he's going to do about tariffs.
You know, we have over a $300 billion deficit. They don't take our cars. They don't take our farm products. They take almost nothing. So the UK is way out of line, and we'll see the UK, but European Union is really out of line. UK is out of line, but I'm sure that one, I think that one can be worked out.
Yeah, because earlier, of course, he was saying he's getting on all right with Keir Starmer. See, it's a game of cat and mouse for Donald Trump. Starmer will listen to that and go, what does he mean? What does he mean by that? What does he mean we're out of line? You know, I'll tell you what, I better go to Brussels and get my instructions. So that's what he's doing today, off to Brussels, back on his travels, and, of course, fixing the foundations, all sorts of things happening. Also, let's get a voice note from Sam on the voice coach.
Morning, Mike. Fantastic show, as always. Keir Starmer. Sorry, mate, but your voice coach, well, he needed to be fired the day that he came in, because quite frankly, he made you worse. if that's possible.
It's true, absolutely right. We'll talk about that coming up a little bit more. Also, we'll find out what Ed Davey's talking about. Nobody really understands what he said when he was on TV over the weekend. Also, self-healing roads. What about that? You know, I said you could grow concrete. Potholes, £14.4 billion worth of problems. Apparently, you can now fix them with what appears to be self-healing roads. So you're basically growing your own asphalt, growing your own bitumen, and basically the hole will fill itself. What a great idea. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Railways want to stop using the word passengers, and the Scots want to ban cats. And it's only Monday, for heaven's sake. This is Morning Glory. We'll be back after this. Now, you might remember that we've talked quite a lot about the rather strange dictation style that Keir Starmer has. His dictum leaves a lot to be desired. Let's see if he got any help from that voice coach. This is how he sounded afterwards.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
He can't speak, literally. The voice coach must be fired. Bring us another voice coach. Oh no, we've got COVID there, Prime Minister. Oh no, you're not Prime Minister yet. You want to be Prime Minister. He doesn't know why he wants to be Prime Minister because this new book, which came out in serialisation form in the Sunday Times at the weekend. It's called Get In. Also, here's another one for you. Russians are suspected of hacking into Starmer's personal email, right? You do wonder what security's like in this country. He was forced to abandon his personal email account after the security services investigated a suspected Russian hack. This was in 2022 when he was Labour leader in opposition. He was warned that his email account may have been compromised in a sophisticated campaign by Kremlin-linked hackers. Do you think he got any of those ones from, you know, Jonathan Goodbody in Nigeria and he sent him some money? Please send money and I will send you even more money. You know, it's the kind of hapless idiot that Starmer is now being painted as by the Labour Party. It's not me that's painting him like this. It's his own party who was saying, basically, this guy couldn't run a bath. He's completely hopeless. And in fact, we'd rather he wasn't even the Prime Minister. So there we have it. Joanna Bell's here, political journalist. Joanna, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. I have to say, I think your impression of Keir Starmer, you really nailed it.
I mean, it's not difficult, you know, just make it sound like Zippy from Rainbow and then sort of add a bit more kind of duckness to it. But the thing is, you know, I don't know what could get much worse for Keir Starmer. You know, his own part, this book that's come out the weekend has really laid open a whole series of questions about why he's doing what he's doing. You know, he wants to be Prime Minister. He doesn't understand why he wants to be Prime Minister. He's not very good at talking to people. He doesn't like shaking hands with people. He's a bit of a loner, human rights lawyer. I mean, Tony Blair doesn't think he's any good. You know, I mean, where does it go from here?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, look, famously, Margaret Thatcher, she had voice coach lessons as well because her voice was meant to have been high-pitched. But, I mean, it does beg the question, what did he sound like? If he sounds like this now, what did he sound like before?
You do wonder.
I think he's very wooden and his delivery is very wooden. He comes across as a very feeble man.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm sure he was a very competent barrister. But, you know, he doesn't really instill much confidence as a leader. When you hear other leaders such as Donald Trump or even Tony Blair, they have booming voices and their delivery is, you know, they always nail it. And the same with Boris Johnson. But, yeah, Keir, he just comes across as a bit watery and a little bit drippy.
Yeah, he really does. And that's the problem. And also, I mean, I'm going to be talking to somebody later on in the show about the definition of a compulsive liar, right? And I'm not suggesting for a moment that would be my description of the Prime Minister. But I mean, he came out of the weekend with a thing that said basically, I've dedicated my life to making Britain safe and for safeguarding people in Britain. And there are MPs who are having to go at him saying, hang on a minute, you were a human rights lawyer who stopped a load of Jamaican criminals from being deported back to Jamaica, several of whom then committed further crimes in this country. And that was down to you and your human rights law.
Well, I mean, even when we look at what's happening today, I mean, children are being murdered in you know, extracurricular activities.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's trying to cover it up. And then you find out the cops are involved. I don't really think that he has any, you know, any plan to how to safeguard our people, because people are coming in. What were you saying? 1 million people are coming in a year And now he's actually not even going to vet anybody coming into the country.
Right. Well, now we're being told as well that the Labour government are doing away with the law that was brought in by the Tories, which said that if you come to this country illegally on a small boat, you will never be able to become a UK citizen. They're now reversing that so that you can now become a UK citizen if you come here illegally, which is madness.
Well, it's terrifying. And I think there was a story a few years ago about how a man who pretended that he was under 18 was actually 35.
Right.
And he was living in some family. I think it's absolutely disgraceful. And you see the American government are doing the opposite. You know, they're vetting people at whatever cost.
Right.
Because it's important to know who is in the country, where they're coming from, and if they have any criminal record.
Right. Well, the Americans are also loading people onto planes and flying them back out of the country, back to where they came from. And when the Colombians tried to stop that last weekend, they got a very fierce lesson in the power of American tariffs and the power of America's president. But let's have a look, talking about safeguarding, let's have a look at Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary. She was on Laura Kuenssberg's show at the weekend, and she was a bit, shall we say, wishy-washy when it came to the subject of protection of people.
So whose job is it then? So it would be a combination at the moment, and it is not working effectively. So you have the Lancashire Police had contact with him. They will have responsibilities about somebody who might be a danger to the public. The social services and they have multi-agency protection networks and the early help. But what you're suggesting is if it's everybody's job, it's no one's job. You are the Home Secretary. What are you going to do about it right now? So the measures we're already introducing is we're having a review of the PREVENT programme to see how far PREVENT can address these issues for young people, for example, where there is a mixed or unclear ideology or who may be obsessed with things like school massacres. So one issue is what more can PREVENT do?
I mean, is it any wonder that PREVENT can't actually do any kind of job worth a fag end? Because if that's the brief... maybe what we should do is have a look and see whether people are obsessed with school massacres and whether that's interesting or dangerous. I mean, you know, just have a proper set of guidelines which say if you've got some guy who you think is a danger to the public, you must report him to the police and something has to be done about it.
Well, that's the thing, you know, and I feel like they're giving people ideas here.
Right.
You know, at the end of the day, that Southport killer was, you know, he was on PREVENT's radar for 2 years before.
Yeah.
You know, he was a disturbed child, and instead of putting him into some institution, the BBC gave him a job on Doctor Who.
Yeah.
This is what we're dealing with. We need to have institutions where anybody who has any ideas about killing children needs to be put away.
Well, exactly. They need to. I mean, if you really want to safeguard people in this country from dangerous individuals, then you don't wait for them to start killing people. Surely you put them somewhere safe before that happens.
Well, exactly, and that's the whole point. I mean, the clue is in the name, PREVENT.
Yeah, right.
They should have, but they don't have any institutions to put these people in. They don't have anywhere because they have this community living well, which is supposed to deal with people with serious mental health problems, such as schizophrenia. That led to that guy killing those people in Nottingham, stabbing them to death, 3 people. And, you know, these people are let loose on our streets. We need to bring back these big institutions and put people who are disturbed inside them.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Now, Keir Starmer's off to Brussels today. He's going to be told by Emmanuel Macron that Brexit was a failure, and he's going to be told, no doubt, over dinner, and he's the first British Prime Minister to attend an EU dinner for 5 years, that the Europeans want us back, closer ties, you know, a more kind of, you know, shall we say, sympathetic trade deal and all of this. But meanwhile, Labour's facing potential investigation over the indirect funding from an organisation while it was in opposition inside the European Union. The Electoral Commission, which regulates party financing in the UK, has said it is looking at a potential regulatory concern about some organisation called the Foundation for European Progressive Studies, who gave a bunch of money, I think £30,000, to the Labour-linked Fabian Society, which apparently is against the rules.
Okay, well, I would say that £30,000 is a drop in the ocean, you know, compared to all the flights David Lammy's been taking. I think
Oh my God, £1 million worth, I think, isn't it?
£1 million, 30,000. By the time that they do the investigation, that's going to be counterproductive because the investigation is probably going to cost more than what they gave to the Fabian Society. I think what really needs to be studied is why the expenses of the Labour MPs who've only been in situ for, less than 8 months, less than a year.
Right.
£700,000 he spent on first-class flights around the world.
Yeah,
it's absolutely ridiculous.
But listen, but don't worry, we've got some good news for you on the growth front, Rachel Reeves' favourite subject, because over the weekend, so I'm sure that some of these things happen over the weekend so that they think they'll disappear under the radar, but we're remembering them every Monday morning. AstraZeneca was going to put a new manufacturing plant up in Merseyside to build, to produce vaccines for this country, and of course it was announced last year in the budget that the firm would be expanding its existing facilities in Speke, which is up there near Liverpool, but they've just pulled the plug on it now that Labour are in because they don't feel confident enough in the actual government policy and in Rachel Reeves' budget. £450 million worth of investment in Merseyside gone like that. Well done, Rachel.
It's absolutely disgraceful. I mean, I think, Rachel Reeves needs to take a leaf out of the Irish government's book and lower corporation tax.
Yeah.
She's put up the national insurance, so it's much more expensive to have employees.
Yeah.
Of course they've pulled their investment. There's no benefit to them to open up a factory here or to, increase the size of their property.
Right.
It's ridiculous. And she hasn't instilled much confidence. I mean, she'd be better placed working as a manager in M&S than the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Well, then she'd probably say in her CV that she was the CEO of M&S, wouldn't she, if she did that?
That's it. I mean, I saw her on TV the other day, and I just think, no, she really, is not suited to this role. And I think it's time that Keir Starmer did a reshuffle and stimulate growth rather than, stifle it.
Also, I begin to wonder if she had the same voice coach as Keir Starmer, because they sound similar. I was saying last week, they've almost become like, they speak like one person. They're kind of, they've got this weird accent, which they're sort of morphing into Rachel Starmer,
Yeah, they all sound very feeble. And, I know that, when you look at someone, and even yourself, Mike, you have a very booming, commanding voice.
Oh.
And that's what politicians are meant to have. They're meant to, boost morale, but they don't really do that with their delivery. They just sound feeble and watery and a little bit, wet behind the ears.
Yeah, it really is.
They're not people I'd want to go to the pub with and have a drink with,
They sound like teachers. That's what they all sound like. They sound like the worst kind of parents' evening types, One final one for you. Rachel Reeves, of course, famously went to China a couple of weeks ago and came back with hardly anything at all, £120 million a year over 5 years. But it now turns out that she's done some other deal because apparently the UK has decided that Russia and Iran are going to face the strictest scrutiny under new plans to root out spies in this country, but China is going to be exempt from it.
Well, they can't really afford to impose tariffs on China. I mean, there's big talk about China open up a huge embassy in Tower Hamlets.
Yeah. I don't think they've been to Tower Hamlets, because if they had been to Tower Hamlets, I don't think they'd want to open a bloody embassy there. I've been there quite recently.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the nicest part of London, but, that's what they're doing. They're trying to stimulate growth, and they're not going to impose these tariffs on the Chinese because, they really can't afford to.
Yeah. No, I think that's the point. Yeah, but I mean, it's one thing not imposing tariffs, but it's another thing allowing spies to kind of get away with spying, isn't it?
Well, it's sort of, I mean, if you were talking earlier about Keir Starmer safeguarding, that's not really safeguarding if you're going to let a load of Chinese spies into the country. I mean, there was already spies in Parliament, apparently.
Yeah. I mean, next they'll be cozying up to Prince Andrew. Oh, no, they've already done that. I mean, never mind. Listen, Joanna, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Joanna Bell, political journalist there. One from Gemma here. He says, morning, Mike. My dad passed away yesterday lunchtime, peacefully in his sleep at 93. My condolences to you, Gemma. He would probably say that if his own Labour Party think their leader is not capable of running a bath, they should probably pull the plug on this one and find a better leader within. Well, I think there's a bit of manoeuvring going on already. There's already loads and loads of noises apparently being made about whatever will happen once Keir Starmer's booted out, because it seems as though they just don't want him there. And Vern in Southampton says, what is this I hear about Starmer possibly breaking COVID rules by using a voice coach at home during lockdown? Well, I can tell you this. We've got Richard Holden MP coming on a little bit later on in the show, and he's got 4 very clear questions about the impetus of whatever it was that happened on Christmas Eve, December the 24th, 2020. He's basically said that the word in the book, you know, get in, suggests that this voice coach came to see Keir Starmer, which was against the COVID rules. Question number 1, does the Prime Minister think that this is a breach of the law? Question number 2, to clear up any date, will you appoint an independent investigator? I believe this is what happened first from Partygate. Number 3, did the Labour Party receive legal advice about how to get around COVID regulations? And number 4, in this period, did Ms Mellinger, and this is the voice coach in question, there she is with the mask on Christmas Eve, did she contract COVID-19? 4 very straightforward questions. We'll find out when we talk to Richard in an hour or so exactly whether he's had any answers from Keir Starmer or indeed from the Labour government. It's not looking good, is it? This is Talk.
Rachel Reeves had this budget for growth, didn't she? This was a great reset, another great reset of Labour. It was then followed by the largest spike in businesses closing since lockdown. 4,500 companies shut down from October to December, marking the biggest quarterly increase in closures since the period of COVID-19 lockdowns. So the third quarter, Q3, of 2024-25 has become the worst month of voluntary liquidations in the UK since the fourth quarter of 2020-2021.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 24 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. Schultz and Starmer, two failing countries with two men who are failures. What a joke, says Alan in Merseyside. This is on the news that Keir Starmer was hosting Olaf Schultz, the German Chancellor, in Chequers at the weekend. Absolutely right. And one here from Perry, who says, Sir Flip-Flop, using a voice coach, was it Metal Mickey? Well, let's have a listen to see how he was doing there.
And that's why this project has always been about fixing the foundations of our country.
There's a slightly different intonation there, isn't it? Normally it's fixing the foundations. This is fixing the foundations. Can you imagine him standing in a room? What was that movie they made about the king who had the stutter? What was it called? Can't remember. The King's Speech. There you go. It should be obvious, that, shouldn't it? Well, this one is the Prime Minister's speech. They can make another film, fixing the foundations, fixing the foundations, fixing the foundations. Try saying it three different ways. I mean, what a joke. And he wasn't even Prime Minister then. We might have to find something from a really long time ago, before 2020, to see what he was sounding like, because I don't know what we can say. We're going to talk now, though, to Kevin Tripp, news reporter at KABC in Los Angeles, because a lot of people getting their knickers into twist about Donald Trump and his tariff war, his trade war. He's put tariffs on China, he's put tariffs on Mexico, he's put tariffs on Canada. Let's have a listen to what he's got to say about possible tariffs for this part of the world.
Well, we're going to see what happens. It'll happen, but we're going to, we'll see how things work out. It might happen with them, but it will definitely happen with the European Union, I can tell you that. Prime Minister Starmer has been very nice. We've had a couple of meetings. We've had numerous phone calls. We're getting along very well. And we'll see whether or not we can balance out our budget. With the European Union, it's $350 billion deficit. So obviously something's going to take place there.
Yeah, so very interesting what's going to happen in the coming days and weeks when it comes to the US economy and, different countries responding to whatever it is that he's doing. Let's talk to Kevin Tripp and find out, how it's going down so far. Kevin, very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
I was reading this morning that a lot of Canadian bars are taking out all of their American drinks and putting them away and replacing them with Canadian drinks and all that sort of thing. But how's it all going over there in terms of not so much what Americans are thinking, but what are the Canadians saying, what are the Mexicans saying?
The Canadians in particular are shocked, they're saddened, and they're quite furious about the whole situation. It's worth noting that there hasn't really been a lot of friction between Canada and the United States, not even on economic issues. I mean, little things here and there. But Donald Trump has not really spelled out his demands for how Canada could avoid these tariffs. He's talked about cracking down on fentanyl and the trade deficit, but he's never given any specific metrics specifically to Canada on what they could do, what they could change to avoid these 25% tariffs, which could be incredibly detrimental just to the average person who's trying to buy groceries.
Yeah, right. And what is it? I mean, I'm forgive me for being ignorant. I mean, I lived in the States for 10 years, and I used to go to Canada quite a lot, mostly the East Coast, to Toronto and Ottawa and places like that. But, I mean, what is it that is mostly exported from Canada to the US?
Major exports are lumber, which doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you're talking about housing, it is a big deal because tens of thousands of houses being built, we could see dramatically higher housing prices. We have a lot of food that goes back and forth. Some critics are calling this the beer tax because you've got big producers like Molson, one of the biggest beer companies in the world. In Canada, the Super Bowl's coming up. A lot of beer is going to be suddenly more expensive for the average American who can't afford more expensive things. And this is having ripple effects across the world. We just saw the Asian and Australian stock markets drop 2 to 3%, with England and European markets set to open and later American markets. There's people on pins and needles whether this is going to really tank the stock markets today and in future days to come, and what ripple effects that could have across the Atlantic and across the Pacific. I should mention, the largest liquor company in the world is just down the street from you. It's Diageo. They own dozens and dozens of brands. With Canada banning some of those brands, not just from the restaurants, but from their state liquor stores, Ontario, Nova Scotia, British Columbia, those state-controlled liquor stores are now taking American brown liquor off the shelf, some of those owned by Diageo. This could have global implications.
Right. And I guess Donald Trump's people would say, yeah, well, the reason we're doing it, though, is to make American products then more competitive, I suppose, and so that people will buy. I don't know if Canadian beer from Molson is any cheaper than Budweiser. Probably isn't. But if it's now more expensive, maybe people will in their hopeful thinking anyway, buy American beer instead of Canadian beer.
I think that's the hope of the Trump administration. And in previous generations, that was easier to do with a more tied together global economy. It's harder to separate those items that are domestic and imported. There's also a real fear among economists that American producers will also raise their prices essentially because they can get away with it.
Yeah.
If you're on the store shelves, you might say, okay, well, if I'm an American brand that's not facing a tariff, I can undercut my competitor. Or maybe I'll just raise my price as well, because if we're all at the same price point, we can all charge the same amount. So we'll see what happens. But this could even affect things like automobiles. Most Japanese cars are not directly impacted by tariffs. However, Honda, Nissan, other companies, they make their cars in Mexico and then move them across the border into America. So those would be impacted by the Mexican tariffs. So a $50,000 car, which is about 38,000 pounds, would suddenly be hit with a $12,500 tariff, making it incredibly unaffordable, literally overnight for some of those consumers.
Yeah, and again, you know, he's been quite open about this. He said to the Chinese, you want to make cars that you sell into America, then make them in America. And if you have a factory in America, then we won't charge you these tariffs, which, and again, in their minds, is the sensible way to protect American jobs.
And there are some Japanese car companies that make cars in the United States. However, it's worth noting for my British friends, 30 years ago, we passed the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, which unites Canada, Mexico, and the United States into a trading system where there aren't many tariffs. And they deliberately set up the system so that you could have car manufacturing across borders. I mean, even in Canada, some American cars are made north of the border as well as south of the border. Sometimes the engine is made in one country and the frame is made in another country, and they're all assembled sometimes in the United States. So with so much of the economy interwoven between our three countries, it is inevitable that consumers are going to be paying higher prices for all kinds of goods if these tariffs go into effect. I should mention, they're scheduled to go into effect in exactly 24 hours. So we'll see if that comes to fruition.
And it may well be that, you know, like a lot of the things that Donald Trump does, this is a bit of a sword waving exercise, and that he wants to see people making some kind of move towards either clamping down on some of the illegal migration that's going on, or possibly, you know, the drug trafficking and the drug, business that goes across all the borders as well. And I guess, again, he would say, you know, the NAFTA agreement was signed when we had a very different world. You know, we didn't have some of the problems that we now have.
Certainly. I mean, the borders used to be less porous in previous generations. You know, we didn't have as much commerce across the border. Canada, though, is still puzzling. It is not a giant hub of drug activity. Yes, there are drugs that are smuggled across the border. I should say in both directions. There are drugs that are smuggled from the U.S. into Canada and some that are smuggled from Canada into the U.S., but nothing like the Mexican border. So the idea that a trade war with Canada is going to crack down on drug trafficking is a bit mysterious, even to those experts who track drug trafficking specifically.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting week again, I dare say. And we're only in, week 2 and a bit, I think. There was sort of the other thing that's quite surprising. You know, the world's getting shaken up every single day. Kevin, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Kevin Tripp, news reporter KABC Radio in Los Angeles, California. Let's get another voice note from James.
Morning, Mike. It's James from Blackburn. A voice coach. That's a real low point. I mean, a voice coach. Dear Christ. Can you imagine what he spoke like before? I wonder if the voice coach went to him, okay, Keir, a new voice in 5, 4, 3. What a plonker. He's brilliant, isn't he? Oh, it's only Monday and I'm already delirious. What a weapon he is.
You can't make this stuff up, can you? I mean, of all the people that you would have a secret meeting with during COVID, it wouldn't be a doctor. No. It wouldn't be anybody from some kind of, you know, foreign organisation from around the world who you had to see. It would be a voice coach. Yeah, that's a really, really important thing. And on Christmas Eve, I mean, does this man not have any kind of, you know, love at all? I thought he'd like to spend time with his family. On Christmas Eve, I will spend time with a voice coach who will teach me how to speak properly. OK, Keir, I'll see you later on at home then. I've got somebody coming round in a mask. Also, imagine wearing a mask and teaching somebody how to speak. There's something wrong with him, isn't there? I think, what is it? What's wrong with him? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:37, I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is Morning Glory. And once again, it is glorious out there. I'm just watching the sunrise, and it's looking rather nice over East London. Watching from the tower here, 17th floor of News UK. Let's get another voice note. Here's Matt on the voice coach.
Hi, Mike. Matt in Hove here. So, two-tier, no idea, had a voice coach. Well, her offices must have had enormous windows because she saw him coming a mile off. Talk about money for old rope. A voice coach. He sounds like Joe Pasquale with a blocked up nose. What, this Prime Minister, he can't get any more embarrassing, can he? Just get rid of him.
I mean, the fact that he's being described, even by Tony Blair, as somebody who's not very interesting and just not very good. Not a nutcase like Gordon Brown. These are Tony Blair's words, supposedly. Still refers to Gordon Brown as a nutcase. And not as sort of... He's a bit like John Smith, except without the charisma. I mean, what is he for? And they're now saying that they treat him like the guy who sits at the front of the DLR. The DLR, for those of you who don't know what it is in London, is Docklands Light Railway. It's an automated train that doesn't have a driver. But for safety purposes, they put a guy sitting at the front of the train just in case something goes wrong. So they're now saying that's what Keir Starmer is. He's sitting on an automatic train. He's not the leader. He just thinks he is, right? So who is the leader then? What's exactly going on? How about this? We should say, morning Mike, says Sean in Norfolk. How would the French language go on with all this bull regarding masculine phrases? Yeah, that's the thing about the railways and the North Devon Council. We'll come back to that. They've mangled the English language once again. Let's talk to Rupert Bell, a man who never mangles the English language. Talks a royal commentator. Rupert, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Now, a couple of matters arising about Prince Andrew this morning. I mean, he seems to have had, quite a few more sort of Chinese contacts than we ever thought, but also a story over the weekend suggesting that the Financial Conduct Authority have filed some documentation in which it suggests that Prince Andrew was in contact with Jeffrey Epstein via email for a lot longer than anybody thought.
Yeah, it was thought that Prince Andrew said that the last time he spoke to him in December, can't remember exactly what year, but then 3 months later, he was still having communication with Jeffrey Epstein. And in it was sort of one of the emails was saying, let's get together and maybe play soon. So whatever that means, I've no idea, but we're not sure. It's thought that email came from Prince Andrew to Jeffrey Epstein.
Right.
But then it just always the spotlight is on him for his choice of friends. And again, his choice of friends with China is another area that, of course, has put him under the very severe spotlight. When he was the international envoy on behalf of Britain, going around the world trying to drum up business, but his choice of friends seems to have once again created problems. And there's even thoughts that the British royal family were encouraging him to try and have those links with China. But obviously we're seeing subsequently that China may have had some ulterior motives and saw him as a soft touch.
I mean, why else would they want to get involved with a guy who could get them inside the Houses of Parliament sort of estate, which is what he appeared to have been able to do? There were lots of pictures that emerged, weren't there, of that guy who was basically more or less declared to be a spy. But it turns out he's probably not the only one.
No, and this is the problem for Prince Andrew. His choice of friends in the pursuit of money and his lifestyle. I mean, the only problem, one of his problems is his arrogance. He's convinced of his rightness. So whatever he does, he won't listen to advice. And perhaps people might have tried to have a word in his shell light, but didn't actually get past go. So this was part of the problem for him, in that he was always thought he knew best. And his choice of friends, he thought he could brazen out his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. That is proved misguided, and one or two others. And now he's just holed up in Royal Lodge, occasionally seen on a horse, not living the life that he feels he's entitled to.
Well, exactly right. I mean, one of the sort of the conflicts of truth that would appear to have emerged from this is that in the interview he did with Emily Maitlis on Newsnight 2019, he basically said he had not seen or spoken to Epstein following that meeting he had in New York with him in 2010. But this email exchange takes place in February 2011, in which it looks as though Epstein's asking Andrew for his schedule when he comes to London.
Well, and this is the problem. You know, what's going on here? You know, if he's saying one thing, you know, but unfortunately, that interview with Emily Maitlis, you can pick holes in a lot of things that went on in it. Yeah. And so despite the fact he thought it had gone extremely well. But actually, that interview has been his downfall, his undoing, and it's continuing the revelations that are coming out. Prince Andrew continues to be a thorn in the royal family's side, and will not go away. And for the king, it must be deeply frustrating that their brother seems to always be dragging them through the mud because of his own stupidity.
Well, exactly. He even gets a mention in this new book, which has been taking the political world by storm this weekend. Patrick Maguire and Gabriel Pogren's book called Get In, which was serialised in the Sunday Times. You know, I'm not going to apologise for saying the word, but there is a context to it. Angela Rayner, apparently, as Deputy Leader of the Opposition, had got involved after the death of Queen Elizabeth II, and she basically urged Buckingham Palace and the upper echelons of the civil service to exclude Prince Andrew from royal service on the grounds that she said that he was a nonce.
Well, again, not a good look.
No, not really.
For Prince Andrew, Angela Rayner wading into criticism, and also his role within the as a councillor of state, questioning should he be one of those. So when the king's away, he could be one of the people who steps up and is responsible, you know, sort of doing the king's duty on his, while the king may be out of the country or indisposed. And obviously Prince Harry was also a councillor of state. So therefore you get this problem for the royal family. And obviously the Labour Party, like many, were concerned about Prince Andrew's involvement and his friends that he associated with. And Angela Rayner, not one to mince words, not everyone agrees with her. I'm sure you're not one who's got Angela Rayner on speed dial for a dinner party.
Listen, I'd like to invite her to dinner, but she's blocked me on Twitter, I'm afraid, so I can't get in touch with her.
Well, you live in hope. Never say never, Mike.
No.
But I don't see it happening anytime soon. No. But anyway, on that note, the point is, for Prince Andrew, it is further poor PR on his behalf, and that actually shows how far he is having any chance of being rehabilitated in the eyes of the British public.
Yeah, absolutely right. Good to see you, Rupert. Thank you very much indeed. Rupert Bell there talks, royal commentator, with the latest news on Prince Andrew, none of which is ever really any good, is it? It looks as though now the Chinese had decided that he was a great target for their kind of their rich ploughing of information in the UK because he was so easy to get to and so easily kind of convinced that he should then introduce some Chinese people, brackets spies, into people's powerful kind of corridors in places like the Houses of Parliament. Extraordinary stuff. Let's get a voice note from John on the Prevent programme.
Morning, Mike. John in Glasgow. I see there's a whole lot of problems with Prevent. I've got a novel idea here. This monster that killed those children, the first time he got caught with a knife, and I believe he was caught multiple times, you put him in the jail for 5 years.
Yeah.
Leave him in the jail for 5 years. That's going to prevent him doing stuff. He comes back out and he gets caught, you give him another 5 years.
Yeah.
Look at the time, the money and the lives. Simple implementation of the law would prevent.
Absolutely right, John. Incredibly simple, isn't it, when you look at it in those terms? If somebody gets caught with a knife, absolutely right. You know, mandatory 5 years. You know, if he starts talking about wanting to kill children, which he did, lock him up, you know, section him, put him somewhere where he can't harm children. I think that's pretty obvious, isn't it? 0344 499 1000. We were talking earlier about how Network Rail has outlawed the word passengers. According to Tom in Merseyside, if you don't agree with the train company's new guidelines, are you being transphobic? I see what you did there, very good. And maybe, says somebody without a name, we should change the word passengers to comrades. We are literally going off the rails. It's true. And Jesse in Dover says, Mike, it really annoys me that the mainstream media was so desperate to trip Boris and the Conservatives up over COVID that they never looked properly into Labour. Of course they didn't. Same before the election, they never looked properly into Labour because they were so desperate to get the Tories out. Sky News, particularly, Beth Rigby and all that crowd. And, of course, we now know what's happening to them, don't we? 7:47, this is Talk.
particular concern about removing scientific and medical assessments of age, so that, as we know, the regime for children is softer than one for adults. And so many adult male asylum seekers falsely claim to be younger than they are. If they're successful in that, they can end up in settings where there are, for example, young female teenagers. We put in place a very sensible set of measures to make sure that that testing was mandatory, was carried out.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:50, 10 minutes away. I'll tell you what, the sunrise is really stunning this morning. I don't know where you are, but tell us, or send us some pictures actually of where you are, if you can see what we can see, because the London sunrise is absolutely extraordinary. I don't know why it's quite so glamorous as it currently is, but it really is looking quite remarkable. We'll try and take a proper picture of it and send it to you. Let's get a voice note from Zippy.
Good morning, Michael. It's Zippy here from Rainbow House. Please stop comparing me to that idiot two-tier Kia. He's more of a bungle, if you ask me.
Very good. I see what you did there. Thank you very much indeed. So ridiculous, all of the jokes coming in about Keir Starmer. The problem is, he's now a figure of absolute and utter ridicule. Even his own party think that he's like the guy that sits at the front of the DLR pretending to drive it. Let's talk to Alex Wilson, Reform's UK London Assembly member. Alex, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
So, we've got plenty to talk about this morning, including something that's just been brought to my attention, that for some reason, and I don't know whether can shed any light on this, Sadiq Khan appears to have removed the pronouns he, him from his Twitter bio. I don't know why he's done that. Is this somehow some kind of the heralding of common sense coming into the City of London's mayor's office?
I've got no idea, Mike, but I doubt very much that it's anything to do with common sense, because I don't think there's much common sense that comes out of his office.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I did see over the weekend is that he's decided to tackle the capital's homeless problems. He says that he's going to announce a record £10 million in funding to help Londoners build their lives away from the streets. So there was a story that I saw over the weekend that in one particular London council, I can't remember which one it is, they're actually moving people out of properties that they're in legitimately in order to house homeless people, which sounds a bit like the Labour government's idea of taking prisoners out of prison so they can put more people in them.
Yeah, it sounds a bit kind of like sort of shuffling cards around on the table without actually addressing the fundamental problem. But we'll see what happens. I'm willing to wait and see exactly how this pans out. But certainly it needs to be a real answer to the problem, not just moving bits of paper around and not achieving a big deal.
Exactly right. I mean, last time you and I spoke, we were talking about knife crime. Knife crime hasn't really gone down in the time that Sadiq Khan's been in charge. In fact, if anything, it is absolutely ballooned in size. We saw some crime figures the other day that showed it going up yet again. Have you had any inroads from your colleagues there at City Hall? You were asking for the support of other parties, I seem to remember, and he was refusing to help you.
Yeah, I was. Remember, Sadiq gave a very clear recommendation to all of the Assembly colleagues that nobody should ever work with Reform, which is a real shame, because we had put together a plan which I wanted to get debated and discussed, where we could fund a knife crime task force, do it by trimming some of the bloated back office waste and overstaffing in City Hall. Unfortunately, we didn't get anyone to support that as an amendment at the budget meeting that we had last week. The Conservatives have said they're working on their own amendment, which I'm looking forward to seeing what comes up, because there's a second round of this whole kind of budget process, and I will be looking very closely to see what they come up with, and if they come up with something sensible that's worth supporting, then I will show that I can work cross-party where it's required, because ultimately what matters is trying to get more knives off London streets to keep people safe and stop this epidemic of kids getting stabbed. It's a tragedy. Just every other day there is a major stabbing incident, it feels like, in London. And what we want to get away from the situation where parents are dreading that phone call from the school saying, look, your son's not coming home today, not because he's in detention, or not because he's doing an after-school club, but because he's been stabbed. That's got to stop. So anything that we can do, and I'm willing to work cross-party. I'm looking forward to seeing what the Conservatives bring to the table in a couple of weeks' time at the next budget meeting. And yeah, if it's sensible, I will support it.
Yeah, absolutely right. Now, in the wake of all those DEI targets being done away with in America, the city watchdog now in London is being told that they should scrap similar proposals because it causes too much red tape, and financial chiefs are saying it's going to strangle the economy at a time when we really don't need to put any more pressure on it.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you there, Mike. We've been told by the government that the priority is growth and getting the economy moving. And for that to happen, it needs more than just a few big infrastructure announcements. I think some of the stuff that Rachel Reeves announced last week is very welcome. In particular, I support the third runway at London Heathrow. I think it's something that's long overdue, a decision that needs to be made and needs to get on with, get space in the ground and get planes in the sky. But to turn the economy around, it takes much more than just that. It needs an attitude and approach to business that embraces growth and dynamism and doesn't saddle us with more and more heavy regulation. We're at a state now where every single state in America has a higher GDP per capita than the UK. That's quite staggering at the moment, but roll forward over a couple of years with everything that Trump is doing, with rolling back net zero, rolling back DEI, and that overburdensome regulation. If we carry on going down the route that those currently in power here want to do, that gap is going to get ever wider. So I'm encouraged that some of these financial chiefs have been basically requesting the FCA to not go down this route because they recognise that it will just add burdensome regulation. The only departments within these companies that will grow out as a result of this are the HR departments and the legal departments. We need the City of London to be a real force at the heart, the driving force of the British economy. Our manufacturing is in decline because we have huge energy prices, the most expensive in the world thanks to net zero. So those sectors that do give us the opportunity to provide growth, we need to absolutely make sure they can turbocharge the economy. That means not adding more regulation. It means scrapping DEI, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, there is a real problem, isn't there, in terms of some of the things that are being made to be done. I mean, we've seen this morning, for example, this ridiculous 134-page document produced by Network Rail, which is all about not calling people things that might upset them, like, is that your boyfriend, or is that your girlfriend, or are you a passenger? I mean, it beggars belief that this is what people think actually makes an economy run well.
It's crazy, absolutely crazy. We need to get back to common sense. This station is the home of common sense. Your show, the home of common sense. It's great that we can talk about this. Hopefully the rest of the world will listen and learn and take that on board.
Donald Trump's now using the phrase common sense more often than I do. So he's obviously been picking it up from the world headquarters of it. But listen, thank you very much indeed. Alex Wilson there, Reform UK's London Assembly member. We'll talk some more about that ridiculous Network Rail scenario. Also, same goes for North Devon Council, who have come out with a new lexicon of words that you shouldn't say because they're either too masculine or too feminine, and that's even more mad than Network Rail stuff. Let's get a voice note from Kieran on the voice coach.
Keith has a voice coach, yes. So I think maybe the only thing with this is maybe he sounded normal before the voice coach came round and his minders said, hey Keith, you sound too normal, you sound like an everyday man, we're gonna train your voice to sound like a trumpet. Someone taking a trumpet lesson for the first time, so they got the guy in COVID. It might have been at that curry club he was at, the one that never happened, that was a business meeting. Everyone else had to stay away from curry houses and pubs, but he was all right to crack on because he was learning how to sound like a person playing a trumpet badly. God help us. Take care, Kieran.
Yeah, absolutely right. Nice one. Kieran, thank you very much indeed. London was under Tier 4 restrictions when supposedly Sir Keir Starmer contacted the actress, whose name it would appear has come out as Leonie Mellinger. I don't know, never heard of her. There she is with a mask on Christmas Eve at Labour Party headquarters. Contacted her and asked for advice on responding to Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. She visited Labour's headquarters and said she had permission to travel as a key worker, according to the Sunday Times. But London was under strict stay-at-home rules after supposedly a rapid rise in infections. You know, so did he break the law? Richard Holden's asking that question. We'll be asking that question as well. Maggie says this, two-tier, never here, no idea. Should ask for his money back. He was well taken for a mug. Great show, Mike, she says. And one from George, who says, Mike, I saw your strapline, Andrew and Epstein, and I immediately thought, the musical. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've seen worse musicals. I'm not sure. You'd have to put an X rating on it, probably, wouldn't you? Coming up in the next hour, we're going to talk to Sir John Redwood. He's a bit concerned about Keir Starmer, who's off to Brussels today, and what he's going to give away to the European Union. This is Morning Glory.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in. An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspects in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public is not being told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles that Biden...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory, and it really is a glorious morning, I have to say. I'm getting some lovely pictures being sent in by many of you on Twitter because the sunrise is doing something that it doesn't normally do. It's spectacular. I don't know whether it means anything. I dare say there'll be somebody out there who can tell me if you're a druid, that it must mean something, you know, like red sky at night and all that kind of thing, and red sky in the morning. It's kind of a yellow sky in the morning. I don't know what that means. Nothing to do with shepherds, I don't think. Anyway, you may have some advice for me, and you may not. Once again, Keir Starmer in the eye of the storm this morning. He's off to Brussels to talk to EU leaders about making Britain closer once again to the European Union that we left 5 years ago. Only on Friday we'll be talking about the anniversary of Brexit. Yeah, it hasn't all worked out in the way perhaps that many of us would have hoped, but it certainly is still better than being in the EU, which Donald Trump says is way out of line when it comes to the business of trade. And he's more than likely to impose a load of tariffs. He's already put a load of tariffs on Canada and Mexico and China, and he's probably going to put it on the EU as well. Britain, on the other hand, remains outside of the EU, thanks to what we used to call the democratic vote, ladies and gentlemen. I know Keir Starmer doesn't like it. Things are so bad for Keir Starmer, though, that he tried to get a voice coach to fix it for him so that he could talk better. Here's the result.
Fixing the foundations is like finding damp in your wall.
Really? Is it? I don't think it is, actually. Surely if you find damp in your wall, that's not fixing anything. That's meaning that you might have to fix something down the road because you found something that's wrong. Like, for example, having the wrong Prime Minister. That's a bit like finding damp in your wall, isn't it? And you call somebody in to get rid of it. That's what we should be doing. 0344 499 1000. Where's Rent-A-Kill when you need them? That's what I want to know. Coming up, Sir John Redwood's going to join us, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, of course. He's got plenty to say about the European Union, not least why on earth we seem to have lost a £450 million investment from AstraZeneca, who was supposed to be expanding their factory up in Liverpool under the Tories, but have now decided to abandon the idea because Rachel Reeves has screwed the economy so much. Also, we'll be talking about railways. Network Rail have issued a 134-page guideline to all employees about why they shouldn't call train passengers anymore. There's a whole load of other stuff as well. And some balmy council in North Devon wants to get rid of code words because they might be too masculine. For heaven's sake. Also up in Scotland, I've always forgotten about this one. They want to ban cats. I don't think it's cats they need to ban, it's politicians. This is Morning Glory, let's get it on. Crikey. I mean, can it go any more mad up there? The SNP, they're not content with completely destroying the Scottish economy, not content with cutting half of the doors off in all the schools so that they can get more oxygen into the classrooms, not content with, investigating the SNP for all kinds of financial shenanigans. They've now decided the biggest problem they've got, cats, because apparently they eat birds. Who knew? So it's dangerous for people to have a cat. And they're following in the footsteps of, or the paw prints of Australia, who apparently have banned cats from certain parts of the country. I don't know. I mean, the world's gone mad. John Redwood is here, Sir John Redwood, no less, who's a bit concerned, as most of us should be, about Keir Starmer's latest jolly. He's off to Brussels, having the first dinner with the EU leaders for first Prime Minister in 5 years to have dinner with them. He's going to have to listen to Emmanuel Macron telling him that Brexit has failed. Meanwhile, our economy is actually, as bad as it is, it's still better than everything else in Europe. So, John, a very good morning to you.
Good morning. Yes, we need some of your common sense. This government is so wrong on so many things. Every time the Prime Minister goes abroad, which is quite a lot of the time, he gives our money and our powers away and seems to take leave of his senses. I'm very worried going to Brussels, he's going to give away all sorts of concessions simply to get talks. It's always the EU strategy. Hang tough, make Britain submit, and then say, well, maybe we might find a crumb from the table after you've sent us a full meal.
Yeah, because they've never forgiven Britain, have they, really? I mean, Emmanuel Macron is apparently, according to the Times this morning, is going to tell the UK to eat humble pie on Brexit. It's almost as if, they're not content with having a conversation. They want us to be supplicants to them. They want us to kind of bow down and praise the European Union as this great organisation, which, frankly, it never has been and very much isn't now.
No, well, that's right. And they always want a very bad deal for us. I mean, what do they want this time? They want to grab more of our fish, and we're still letting them have too many with their super trawlers doing considerable damage. They'll probably want some more of our money. I expect they'd quite like us to go back into the Erasmus student scheme, which meant that we paid for many of their young people to come to Britain, and we didn't get so much money for our people to go abroad. Yes. And of course, that scheme didn't allow our students to go to America or Australia, whereas our new scheme, the Brexit scheme, Turing, the money all goes to British students and they can go to any world university. We don't want to reverse those gains. We need more of those Brexit-type wins from a government that believes in ourselves and wants our country to prosper.
Right. Well, because a lot of people telling me this morning, Sir John, that, you know, we should be looking across the Atlantic, which is our biggest trading partner. We should be looking to the United States and President Trump as a sort of a guide as to what we should be doing on defence, what we should be doing on immigration, what we should be doing on trade. But instead he's gone the other way.
Yeah, and it's crazy. He's trying to rebuild his relationship with Trump because he and his colleagues did everything they could to undermine it, both by bad-mouthing President Trump before the election and then, of course, sending Labour people in to try and stop him getting elected. So they've got a lot of rowing back to do. I'm glad that Lord Mandelson has issued an apology. But on top of that, you don't then incense Trump, who is very angry with asymmetric trade with the EU. He thinks they cheat all the time. And now we're trying to get closer to their trade position. Well, that's just the wrong thing to be doing.
Exactly right. Well, President Trump has said overnight, in fact, that I think there's a $350 million deficit between the US and the EU. I think we can watch that and let's see what he has to say.
Well, we're going to see what happens. It'll happen, but we'll see how things work out. It might happen with them, but it will definitely happen with the European Union. I can tell you that. Prime Minister Starmer has been very nice. We've had a couple of meetings. We've had numerous phone calls. We're getting along very well. And we'll see whether or not we can balance out our budget. With the European Union, it's $350 billion deficit. So obviously something's going to take place there.
$350 billion deficit. And also, you know, he knows very well, does he not, that the European leaders, as such as they are at the moment, are not very big fans of Donald Trump. And in fact, most of them have said very derisory things about him. But the world is taking notice of these tariffs that he's putting on China and Canada and Mexico. And we need to make sure that he doesn't put them on Britain, right?
Exactly right. And we could be much more positive now. I've been urging this government to take a draft free trade treaty to America. We can do that now. We're not in the EU. The EU was never willing or able to make compromises to have a free trade agreement with America because they were winning with their asymmetric trade and their city rules. They're now going to get their comeuppance because Trump is going to call their bluff. We need to be very positive about the American relationship. You know, this growth race that Reeves wants to join, and we haven't joined properly yet, why on earth are we trying to back the losing horse, slow growth Europe? German economy hasn't grown at all for 2 years, and not backing the winning horse, which is America romping away with now double the GDP per head of the EU. Surely you want to be learning from the winners.
Well, you would think. And I mean, our unfortunately hapless Chancellor, who goes from sort of, you know, bad to worse every single week, Rachel Reeves, she suddenly now decided that growth is her new thing. She used to say that the economy in Britain was in a terrible state and she'd inherited a £22 billion black hole. Now she reckons that by building a sort of fictitious third runway in 25 years, everybody's going to go, oh, brilliant, fantastic, let's all put some more money into the economy. Unfortunately, AstraZeneca don't agree. They've just cancelled a £450 million investment that they were going to make under the Tories in a vaccine manufacturing plant up in Liverpool.
Yeah, absolute disaster for Labour because it was a success of the outgoing government that they'd attracted this very big pharmaceutical development, and more importantly, attracted it to Liverpool. And what this new government has done is they've lost investment, and all their new investment schemes are going to be around London and the South East. It's 3 new enlarged airports in the South East, and this new link, Cambridge to Oxford, with loads of housing within the triangle down to London. So it's all southeastern investment. And they've lost this really big industrial investment for the Northwest, which had been hard won.
Yes.
It's a disaster.
It is a disaster, and so many companies now are issuing warnings. We got one this morning in the Telegraph, the EY Item Club, which apparently is a sort of a financial organisation. I can't say I'm familiar with it, but they're basically saying that the growth outlook for 2025 has been slashed now. Business confidence at an all-time low. Much of the blame pinned on the budget, basically, because we haven't even seen the damage from that yet, as national insurance rises kick in April and minimum wage rises kick in April. You know, I speak to companies every day, as I'm sure you do, Sir John, who say we're not even sure we can survive. You know, I was in a very well-known restaurant last week where they do very good business and they turn over quite a lot of money and they pay an awful lot of tax, and they said basically the national insurance and the minimum wage rises will completely wipe out any profit they made in 2024.
Well, this is the danger, and as you rightly say, they're beginning to plan where they're going to be from April when they have these huge extra bills that the taxman is going to send them. And we see already that the vacancies have dropped off because they think, well, I'm not going to go out and hire anybody. We're now going to see them shedding labour. I hope they do it by voluntary means, but some of them may have compulsory redundancies as well. The high street is going to be torn apart by this because they cannot afford all those extra costs of employing people. And they're discovering that trade is down because it's not just business confidence that has been badly hit, but consumer confidence has been a bit hit as well. And so shop sales are very disappointing. She's got to cancel those tax rises, Mike.
Yeah.
And then if you say, well, how do you pay for that? It's pretty easy. I mean, the Bank of England has sent a bill for £30 billion of losses already this year. Stop the Bank of England losing all this money. Why is it so difficult? The ECB isn't losing all that money. The Fed isn't losing all that money because they don't go selling bonds at huge losses in the way the Bank of England is.
Well, exactly right. And I mean, in December alone, this government borrowed £17.8 billion, which is mostly going to be used to pay interest rates rather than anything that's going into the economy or anything that's going into public services. And it's this never-ending spiral. It's like, you know, if you had a credit card that you maxed out and you just went and asked for more credit and you just keep spending money that you don't have.
Well, indeed, and they've got a nationalised sector, not just the Bank of England, losing a fortune. Post Office has lost 1,800 million in the last few years, and they still haven't got a turnaround plan to stop that. The railways that you've been talking about, it's not just all the money they spend on sending out silly instructions on how to speak, but it's that they don't attract enough fare-paying passengers, or they only attract passengers on massive discounts, and so they're running huge losses. And all the government wants to do is to take on more of the losses for the taxpayer by nationalising the rest of them.
Yeah, exactly right. It's a shocking state of affairs. And just finally, Sir John, I don't know if you had a chance to read any of the tidbits this weekend in this new book called Get In by Gabriel Pogrom and Patrick Maguire. It's quite an extraordinary picture that is painted of this current Prime Minister, who appears to be a cross between sort of a loner, a human rights lawyer, somebody who thinks he needs a voice coach to make him speak badly. I mean, my favourite analogy is that he's the guy sitting at the front of the Docklands Light Railway thinking he's driving the train when in fact it's automatic.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. And yes, I'm very worried that he's a bad international lawyer and he needs to become a Prime Minister pretty quickly because he always wants to give away everything.
Yeah.
From the United Kingdom to overseas interests as soon as any kind of legal challenge in the international courts. I mean, Chagos is another disaster.
Right.
We can't afford $9 billion over the next few years to give away an island which is ours and we ought to keep. And that's another thing that has deeply offended Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So come on, Rachel Reeves, cancel the $9 billion, tell Mauritius they're not getting the islands, and we can live a lot happier and a bit richer.
Yeah. Well, what a good piece of advice. Sir John Redwood speaking common sense on a Monday morning. Nothing like it. Thank you very much indeed. Sir John Redwood, former Conservative government minister. They've got some lovely pictures coming in, by the way. I'm not trying to turn this into Radio 2 or anything, but, I mean, it is an incredible sunrise out there. One from Joe. Good morning, Mike. Misty and frosty start in East Sussex, and then a glorious sunrise. There's that one. Another one from Jimmy. A picture of my son on a beach in Goa, listening to your fantastic show. Thank you very much indeed for that. And also one from Katie. Sunrise also amazing here on the Wirral. Absolutely remarkable. Let's get another voice note from Tony.
Morning, Michael. Just watching your show this morning, and I've noticed a particular, let's say, ganging up on Keir Starmer. And I, for one, think he speaks impeccable. And, you know, it's not right, all this bullying, tantamount to far right, but it's just bullying. And I've got to hang up now. See you soon.
Thank you, Tony.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hey, I'm gone.
Oh, my goodness me. Isn't it remarkable? I mean, imagine needing a voice coach to make you sound that robotic. That is the problem, isn't it? Absolutely ridiculous. Good morning, Mike. The reason why Trump is doing the tariffs is he wants to stop tax in the USA, and this is his goal. If he can do this, every American will be better off by £30,000 a year every year. A lot of economists have said this is the golden age for the USA, and that's from Simon in Essex. Well, I'm not sure they're going to be that much better off, but certainly Reem Ibrahim was here. She doesn't like the idea of tariffs because she's an old-fashioned libertarian, doesn't think there should be any restriction on free movement or free goods or anything like that, and free trade. However, if a country like China is undermining businesses in this country or undermining, surely, industries in this country, like the car industry, then surely you have to protect those car industries because you have to protect the jobs. I don't see a problem with that whatsoever. Yes, I think it's good that we are offered the opportunity to buy tomatoes from Morocco, and I don't think the EU should be putting a tariff on them so that we can buy the tomatoes that are being sold here. But, you know, the tomatoes from Morocco shouldn't be undermining the tomatoes that are grown in this country. But if they're being grown in Spain, what's the difference? Just because they're in the EU. 0344 499 1000. Coming up, we're going to speak to Lucy Beresford, who's a psychologist. She's going to be telling us about what can only be described as inveterate liars, compulsive liars, and people who just continually cannot tell the truth. You might figure out why we're asking her that question in a moment. This is Talk.
The EU drives a very hard bargain and they will do exactly what suits the EU. I think Keir Starmer thinks that now we can be all friendly with the EU. Well, that is not the case. So what they are saying is that they want to have a new security pact. By that, read into that, we want to have a common army across Europe. But secondly, in addition to all of that, they want our fish. They want European young people to live and work here as the price of a deal. And Keir Starmer seems quite okay with that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glories, 8:23. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through to 10 o'clock, of course. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along then. Coming up a little bit later on, we're going to be talking to Richard Holden, Tory party MP, former leader, I think, of former Conservative chairman, I should say. He's got a lot of questions for Keir Starmer over the voice note scenario because, of course, the questions need to be asked. Were the COVID rules broken at any point? We're going to speak to Harry Cole now, political editor, of course, at The Sun. His column in The Sun this morning. On page 1 of The Sun, just before we do that, the youngest UK victim so far of the war in Ukraine, a British teenager killed by a Russian drone minutes into his first combat mission in Ukraine. Foreign Legion volunteer James Wilton, 18 years of age, from Huddersfield, I'm afraid, is the first victim. But moving on to page 10, if you think the Tories were split over Europe, check out what's going on inside of Labour. Harry, very good morning to you, sir.
Morning, Mike.
So, I mean, I've got to ask you about this new book, first of all, the Sunday Times book, which paints a very curious picture of the man Keir Starmer. The book's called Get In. Your colleagues, my colleagues in the building, Gabriel Pogren and Patrick Maguire, have written it. I mean, they paint this picture of a guy who's kind of a bit of a solitary figure. You know, the analogy that he's sitting at the front of a driverless train because he thinks he's driving it, but he's not really. He wants to be Prime Minister, but he doesn't really know why. I mean, it's a very odd kind of, you know, individual that he would appear to be.
Yeah, so there's been relatively few books, really, about Keir Starmer. I mean, he's been on the scene for years, really, even as a sort of prosecutor and then as an opposition politician. But he seems to have escaped the sort of boroughs. There was one written by his good old mate, a guy called Tom Baldwin, who wrote this sort of glorious hagiography of him. How brilliant was and what a normal bloke he was because he likes football and football. And you know, and that's he should be prime minister because he's such a normal bloke. But this actually paints, yeah, you're right, a much more damning picture, having actually talked to people around him. And these are people that are meant to be his biggest supporters. Yeah. Well, so even in their sort of, you know, most optimistic moments, they realise that actually they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Now, look. A lot of these, you know, sort of, you know, around Westminster, there's lots of people that like to big up themselves, but you know, it does paint a picture of something we kind of always guessed about Keir Starmer is that he's just, you know, he's slightly tin-eared. Right. Comes to politics. Despite that, he's managed to sort of pull the Labour Party away from the sort of hard left of Corbyn and get into office as the Tories sort of imploded, having taken out Boris Johnson or played a part in taking out Boris Johnson and convincing the Tory party to take out Boris Johnson. But what's fascinating is that quite how powerful lots of the people around him and behind him are, who are extremely big P political and actually like sort of devote their lives to sort of, you know, getting the Labour Party where it is. And actually, it seems to be that the sort of technocratic manager, Keir Starmer, outsources almost all of his politics to these other people. Right. So you can get quite far with that, but actually being Prime Minister, you've got to be instinctive. You've got to make a decision. You've got to go on your gut sometimes. And so I wonder how long being that sort of that sort of small P political works for a Prime Minister when they're surrounded by sort of politics every day.
Exactly right. And they paint him as a kind of HR manager type more than anything else. And the other thing that I thought came out of it rather interestingly was that Angela Rayner is far cleverer and more manipulative and Machiavellian than anybody gives her any credit for.
Yeah, I think someone to be seriously underrate Angela Rayner at your peril. She did those amazing moments where sort of she was ready to basically go. Apparently she had a 5,000 strong rally ready to go. She had the unions on side. I mean, that really read to me like, you know, she pulled back from the brink before back in 2020 in the wake of the 2021. When was it?
It was Hartlepool
election 21 when Keir Starmer was wobbling and there was other points where he tried to fire and she was ready to go. And it basically read to me like a sort of coded warning of, I did it once and I didn't pull the trigger, but my God, I could do it again. So don't you dare try and, you know, prune my powers any more than you already have, because she's obviously lost she's not really the Deputy Prime Minister. That's Pat McFadden, the Deputy Prime Minister role. She's got the title, but she hasn't got the power. Right. But she has managed to secure the palatial sort of gift of hospital gift of the home that goes with it. But having the power. So I wonder how many of those baubles that Angela Rayner has got are because in the back of their minds they know actually if there's anyone that's really a threat, it's not Wes Streeting, it's not Rachel Reeves. The left, the threat of the left of the Labour Party is embodied by Angela Rayner.
Absolutely right. And obviously you mentioned the voice note as well. Sorry, not the voice note. The voice coach. I've got a voice note because I know you like these, so we've saved this one for you. We played it a bit earlier. This is James on Starmer's voice coach.
Morning, Mike. It's James from Blackburn. A voice coach. That's a real low point. I mean, a voice coach. Dear Christ. Can you imagine what he spoke like before? I wonder if the voice coach went to him, "Okay, Keir, a new voice in 5, 4, 3. What a plonker. He's brilliant, isn't he? Oh, it's only Monday and I'm already delirious. What a weapon he is.
I mean, serious point, though. He could be in trouble if this turns out to have been a breach of COVID rules, right?
Yeah, I suspect I suspect sadly that ship has sailed. I mean, it was only what's worse, a piece of birthday cake in the office, or breaking lockdown rules allegedly to meet your actress, mysterious sort of actress advisor. Apparently, they were suggesting that she was a key worker.
Oh, yeah.
That's how important being Keir Starmer's voice coach is. Look, politicians use these sort of tricks, a lot. They get trained within their lives for TV debates and how to be normal. But again, it just doesn't really. It feeds into that image of a man, a sort of accidental politician, really, that all the sort of ballast he can get. Look, I suspect there'll be some very awkward questions at this morning's lobby briefing in a couple of hours' time. I think I can know the answer, which was, we speak for the government, we don't speak for the past. But at some point, Keir Starmer's going to be asked about this. Obviously, he did make all those grandiose promises when he was trying to get rid of Boris Johnson. If he was ever found to breach any lockdown rules, he would resign. Now, the tricky thing about this was Tier 4 back in Christmas 2020 was really quite strict. This wasn't just guidance. This was actually the law. This was changed by statutory instrument.
Yeah.
So actually, unless you were directly working as a in COVID response, or you had no other excuse not to go to work, you were meant to be doing it from home. Now, the awkward thing for Starmer is at other points during the pandemic, this voice coach is there on Zoom and is guiding him virtually. So why she couldn't do it that particular day, which was Christmas Eve, you cast your eyes back, it was when Boris Johnson secured a Brexit deal on Christmas Eve. And I remember I was at the Downing Street press conference, sitting probably in this very chair now, because we couldn't go to Downing Street. We were told it cannot happen in person.
Right.
So we're going to do it virtually. This is one of the biggest moments of the country, had faced, biggest moments of Boris Johnson's premiership, and they couldn't even have journalists into Downing Street to talk about it.
Right.
So I think the idea that this voice coach was a key worker, critical to the pandemic response, is going to do a lot of heavy lifting. But Richard Holden, who you've got on next, I mean, look, he's got the bit between his teeth. He's written to the Prime Minister. I suspect the answer to that letter will be to file it in a bin. But I think he will face questions at some point about this. When who knows? When some journalists corner him.
It's just more bad news for him, really. Finally, Harry, just a bit on what's he going to do in Brussels. First Prime Minister to go to an EU dinner for 5 years. I'm sure Emmanuel Macron will tell him that Brexit's a failure. He will try and sort of suck up to them and say we must change the guidance, we must change our relationship. What's he going to come back with, do you think?
Well, look, nothing overnight. This is all, it's kind of ironic, isn't it? Just as Donald Trump's saying, look, that Brexit basically means that we could be spared from EU tariffs, potentially. Off he goes with the begging bowl to the EU. I've written about this in the column tomorrow, and I just think, when he's in the air, this morning, flying in his nice little private jet to Brussels, have a look out the window and just have a little think about how it's gone for all of your predecessors. Who's managed to actually get something from Brussels? Theresa May didn't. She played, she tried to be reasonable and play nice. David Cameron tried to do, the sort of technocratic niceties and offer concessions and play nice. Who was it that actually managed to achieve something? Boris Johnson didn't play by the EU rules, held a gun to the EU's head on no deal, held a gun to Parliament's head on no deal, really sort of befuddled them and mixed up a bit. and got results. So playing Mr. Nice Guy, bringing in your baskets and your bundles of proposals to the table never really works. And actually look at what Brexit has actually enabled to do. And if it enables us to escape those Trump tariffs, then that's worth its weight in gold already. So don't throw it away would be my advice to Starmer, and don't, look at the front page of the Times, look at these French already saying, oh, we're going to punish roast beef. No, come on, this is not how we do it. We're not going down another 5 years of playing to their tune. So if you want concessions from Brussels, don't play by the rule book.
Exactly right. Just say no, I think would be the thing. Harry, very good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Harry Cole, please go to At The Sun, column in page 10, as ever, every single Monday. You don't want to miss that in The Sun today. Let's talk now to Lucy Beresford, psychologist, because, I thought it occurred to me when I saw yet another tweet that went out over the weekend where Starmer claims to have been spending his entire life and his entire career making Britain safer for people. And I thought to myself, well, that's not true. A lot of people started being critical of him. And I suddenly thought to myself, he tells a lot of lies. I mean, I don't shrink from the fact that I've called Keir Starmer a liar on many an occasion. Lots of the things that he said have turned out not to be the case. So I thought, let's get a psychologist's view of why politicians lie so much and whether, in fact, Keir Starmer could be possibly a compulsive liar. Lucy, very good morning to you.
Hello, Mike.
Now, I mean, there are many things that you can say about Keir Starmer. Yes, he's a politician, and politicians more and more now don't seem to tell the truth about things. But he seems particularly, prone to saying things which he must know at the time he's saying them are not correct or not going to come true.
I think you raise a really interesting point. I mean, people would argue that that's the problem with politicians in general. And there, in a way, are three types of political lies. There are the state management lies, where you might say something in order to get elected or in order to pass some legislation. There are fear-mongering lies, which a lot of people would argue cropped up during, let's say, the pandemic. And then there are the lies for personal gain. And what we know from compulsive liars is that they're really trying to create a narrative about themselves, a narrative that they see in their head. And the interesting thing is that we all do that. We all tell stories to each other about ourselves and about our lives based on the narrative that we have created. And it seems that politicians do that more often. But I thought the conversation you were having with Harry there raised a really interesting point, which is it's almost as if Keir Starmer hasn't really thought about himself as a politician from the very beginning. He was a lawyer. He had a very particular narrative about himself. So he comes to this game of politics very lately, and it could be argued that he doesn't play it very well.
No, I think so. And looking at the sort of the things that compulsive liars do, lying about something even when there's no reason to do it, seeming unconcerned with being caught in a lie, getting defensive when confronted about a lie. He exhibits all three of those things, doesn't he?
He does, and what we notice is that small children do that because they're not very skilled at lying. They discover that it is possible to not tell the truth and that mummy and daddy might not find out. And then they discover that actually mummy and daddy have a lot more worldly knowledge than they do. And again, I worry that Keir Starmer is so new to this game of politics that he almost doesn't understand how it works. So that this story about the vocal coach could get more traction than it really arguably deserves, simply because it goes back to the very heart of unfairness. The electorate is very alert for things not seeming fair. And one of the things that Keir Starmer said, the narrative that he created, was that Boris Johnson has done these awful things about lying about a party, and I will never do something like that. Now we discover that that is not true. So what is the sanction on the person who tells that mistruth?
Exactly right. And he gets himself into all sorts of trouble and has done since he's been Prime Minister precisely because of that reason, because he said things deliberately. Like he said council tax would not go up under Labour. He said not a penny more. He made it very dramatic. It wasn't just, we'll try our best to keep your taxes low. He was dramatically saying taxes will not go up, and now they're going up 25%. He told farmers that they would not be having an inheritance tax imposed upon them at their conference back at the end of 2023. He lied to them. He said that he would reduce energy bills by 300 quid. It was a lie. It wasn't true. These are all stories that are coming back to haunt him now.
Absolutely. They're stories, and the argument has to be, would the electorate really believe these stories? So another example would be around pension relief, another would be around the two-child benefit cap. All of these stories that were put out there before the election with a view, this is where state management comes in, with a view to win the election. Arguably, these stories didn't need to be told because there were so many people that perhaps were not going to vote for the Conservatives that the Labour Party might get in. And yet they told these stories already. So it's flawed thinking to think you can just say anything and everybody will vote for you and those chickens will not come home to roost. Unfortunately, as all liars do discover, and people who tell mistruths or are economical with the truth, eventually it does come back to bite you.
It does, and I think it will come back and has come back. Lucy, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Lucy Beresford, psychologist. You know, I think the jury is no longer out. I mean, you know, we might as well just say it. Keir Starmer's a liar. Is he a compulsive liar? That remains to be seen. Coming up, somebody who is definitely not a compulsive liar, Jim White from talkSPORT, 8:38. It's transfer deadline day.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:41. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Now, Amanda is here also at 10 o'clock with his own show. Jim White from talkSPORT. Jim, welcome to Morning Glory.
Mike, good morning to you. With my own show, I like that.
Yeah.
Simon Jordan has nothing to do with anything I do.
He occasionally pops in, doesn't he? He does a couple of shows a week, you know.
Yeah,
that
he makes up the numbers, mate.
He makes up the numbers.
Yeah,
Quite a controversial figure, you know. But,
oh, he is indeed.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still calling it your show because I know it'll annoy him.
Well, that's good, and he's on his way in now, and he's listening, so that will annoy him, and I'm delighted about that.
Now, big day for you guys today, because normally it's January 31st, but they've obviously moved final transfer deadline day to today.
Yeah.
Any particular reason they couldn't have done it on the 31st?
Well, they nudged it on to the start of this week. I mean, to be honest, Mike, keeping across it is tougher than you can imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
We are February the 3rd today.
Yes.
The Saudi one was over the weekend, the deadline. We've got to keep our eye on that now. We're duty bound to.
Right.
and there's quite a lot of activity regarding Turkish clubs. Galatasaray, Fenerbahce, the two big clubs there, and it's well into January.
Right.
So it's kind of like keeping across it, but today's the one.
Right.
Today's the important one. And as I always say, expect the unexpected.
Yeah.
It's already beginning to gather pace.
Yes.
And
is there the same level of
it.
money still in the Premier League, or has Saudi kind of changed things a little bit?
No, that's a good point. I mean, last time around, the winter transfer window, 96 million was spent, and that was because of PSR, profit and sustainability rules. They've come in. Now, it seems that doesn't apply. Right. At the start of the month, there was a feeling a few clubs would breach PSR. They didn't. We thought they would. Right. That did not happen. And now there's a fair amount of spending so far in this month. £281 million has been spent. Curiously, 138 million of that spent by Manchester City.
Wow. I mean, what has happened to them?
I know.
How is it possible for Pep Guardiola to have been the world's greatest coach to suddenly go to where he's now? Lost, what, 5-1 on Saturday?
Yeah, they lost 5-1 to Arsenal yesterday. Curiously, they are the ones who are having to do business. Yeah. They're choosing to do business. They spent 138 million quid. Marmoush, Kuzanov, Victor Rice, three players that, to be fair, we weren't really that aware of here in England, but they have come as Manchester City attempt, curiously, I mean, it seems mad saying it, attempt to buy their way out of trouble.
Yeah. It is incredible, isn't it? Because I'm looking down I mean, they're still in fourth place, so I mean, it could be worse. But Nottingham Forest above them, which is a bit of a surprise this year, isn't it?
It is. Nottingham Forest at the weekend
Damien's shooting his mouth off in there because Damien's a big Nottingham Forest fan.
Is Damien a Nottingham Forest fan, is he?
Yeah, he's just been punching the air, yeah.
All right, well, I was surprised.
Are they the Leicester of this year or something?
I was wondering why. As I walked in there, Damien was punching the air, but he didn't give me a reason why.
Okay.
And now I know. A Nottingham Forest fan. I mean, there isn't a quiet day for Nottingham Forest at the moment. No. Especially with their owner, of course, the shipping magnate. We keep a close eye on them. Will they do business? They might, but the curious one so far, Mike, has been Manchester United's Marcus Rashford, no longer at Manchester United, now out on loan. The golden boy at one stage could do no wrong. I mean, it's hard to imagine him in any other shirt than a Manchester United one. And now he's going to wear an Aston Villa shirt from this point onwards until the end of the season. Gone there on loan, 325 grand a week, and it's thought that Villa will pay 75% of his wage.
And he's been at Manchester United since about the age of 7, hasn't he?
Yes.
I mean, he's not known at any other place.
Exactly. I mean, as I say, it's hard to imagine him anywhere else. But
do you think his England career's over now as well then, or has he just lost his lustre? What's going on?
I think that. He's lost his lustre. Amarim tested him a couple of times and said, I need more from you, especially in training. It was perceived by Amarim that he didn't get that. And this guy, Amarim, not long in the hot seat at Manchester United, who cannot buy a win at the moment.
Right. But they're still 13th in the table, which is pretty awful.
It's incredible. But Amarim means what he says and says what he means. And Rashford has gone, and I think not to return. So Villa have an option to buy at the end of the season. Whether they'll do that or not is another matter. Manchester United signing a couple of players. Patrick Dorgu, a left back from Lecce. They need a left back, Mike, because Luke Shaw, once of Manchester United and England, not so in recent weeks and months. Injury played. In comes Dorgu, and in comes a fellow by the wonderful name of Aidan Heaven from Arsenal's 21s. So Manchester United attempting to add to their ranks as well.
Yeah. So are you in for the long haul? Are you going to be back to the midnight hour tonight? Or
I am indeed, mate.
You are? Because that's the big show that everybody watches. I mean, we miss Harry Redknapp, don't we? He doesn't drive outside anybody's house anymore in his car.
No, he used to get his car window down and speak to us.
That was always the thing
from the training ground. I used to love speaking to Harry. I will speak to Harry in the course of today, Mike, because it wouldn't be deadline day for me not to do that. But then I shall return tonight and we'll be live in TalkSport from 10 right through the deadline. Myself, Alex Crook, and a man who's never forward and never backward and coming forward, that is, and that is the Peterborough United chairman and owner, Darren McAntony.
Oh, fantastic.
You should have him on one time. He'd love to be on with you.
I'd love to get him on, absolutely. Right, see if you put in a good word for me.
I could be the third party negotiator on that for you, Mike.
You don't going to take a fee or anything, are you?
Okay. You look gorgeous at this time of the morning. I have to say, mate, the blush on the makeup helps.
It's not blusher.
No?
This is my natural
Is that your natural
look.
tone?
Yeah, absolutely
wow,
right.
Congratulations.
Yeah. If you're looking for something a bit more orange, I can point you in the direction of the White House. But, you know, that's another story. Jim White, thank you very much indeed. TalkSport presenter, not only on his show today, 10 to 1, but also later on tonight, going through midnight with transfer deadline day. There's an awful lot of money swilling around. He'll keep you abreast of absolutely all of it. Good to see you, Jim. Thank you very much indeed. Coming up, we're going to be talking about a great many things, including the amazing sunrise, right? Lots of you sending in great pictures. We've got misty and frosty in East Sussex from Joe. Jimmy's on a beach in Goa listening. Sunrise also amazing here on the Wirral, says Kate. So it's all happening. These are the pictures you can now see if you're watching us. It is quite remarkable. It's all good stuff. We'll be back after this.
EU drives a very hard bargain and they will do exactly what suits the EU. I think Keir Starmer thinks that now we can be all friendly with the EU. Well, that is not the case. So what they are saying is that they want to have a new security pact. By that, read into that, we want to have a common army across Europe. But secondly, in addition to all of that, they want our fish. They want European young people to live and work here as the price of a deal. And Keir Starmer seems quite okay with that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
8:50, welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham, and it is a particularly glorious morning, as I say. A very, very nice sunrise, which many of you have contributed to sending me pictures of, and some of you, including Bill, are now just sending me pictures of you on holiday on a beach. Thank you. That's fine. It's all, not a problem at all. Bill from Eltham says, also currently listening on a beach in Goa. Small world. Anyway, mate, keep up the great work you and all your colleagues do on the world's greatest radio station, Talk. Isn't that amazing? There's at least 2 people on a beach in Goa listening to Morning Glory. tremendous. This is the kind of thing we live for. So well done, you. We can maybe we can do that as well. Find people all over the world who are listening, because I know we've got listeners in Dubai, we've got listeners in Hong Kong, in Australia, in America, all over the place. In Spain, in France. You know, we are conquering the world, ladies and gentlemen. It's got to be done. Your neck of the woods, says Darren. One from East Sussex. Yeah, that looks nice as well. Beautiful. Let's talk to Stephen Wolfe, Director for the Centre of Migration and Economic Prosperity. I know I've said it before, Stephen, but I really think you've got to get rid of that title of economic prosperity in there, because it's definitely ruining the economy, this business of migration. But here we are. Very good morning to you. Let's talk about what Labour have done over the last few days. And we only really just discovered it recently. It sort of got sneaked through that they changed the law that had been brought in that said if you arrive in this country illegally, you will not become a UK citizen except under very exceptional circumstances. They're getting rid of that because they say it was creating uncertainty.
Very good morning, Mike. Yes, perhaps the name of economic prosperity is creating uncertainty, so it's time for a change. But unlike the Keir Starmer, we've just seen again another one of those lies that the Labour Party themselves have been perpetrating, which is that they were going to be strong on illegal migration and deal with the gangs. And you're right, what they've done over the last few days is sneak through changes to the very difficult illegal Immigration Act that Rishi Sunak tried to get through the Commons, which had a very important clause that if you came over to this country, you were deemed illegal almost immediately, and you weren't allowed to bring over family members, and you weren't going to get your nationality. That was a very crucial element to it, because you were deemed to be a criminal until proven otherwise. All that Keir Starmer is doing is giving a fast-track route for those people who come across here. But more importantly, and this is the key point, it's giving a piece of marketing material for the people smugglers to say, hey, look, Britain's back in business. Yeah. Give us your money. We'll get you over there. You'll never be able to leave. And more than that, you'll soon become a citizen.
Right. And this is the problem, the bit they don't seem to see. You know, they're dealing with these people traffickers. They're going, oh, I know what we'll do. We'll make some new laws that'll make it tougher for them. You know, they're already breaking the laws that you've got because they're criminals. You know, it's not difficult to work this one out. Why on earth would they suddenly go, oh, my goodness me, there's a new law that says we can't enter Britain, so we better not. I mean, they already know there's laws against it, but it doesn't stop them.
No, it doesn't. And all we have to look at now is watch what's happening with Donald Trump, his immigration advisor, Stephen Miller, those who are heading Homeland Security and the border forces. They have actually yesterday, announced how they're going to use their coastal guards to actually remove people straight away to airports so that they can be deported. Whereas we have our own Royal Navy and also the RLNI who are picking them up and bringing them over. That's what people smugglers see. They see the determination of the United States removing those citizens immediately on the day that they arrive. Yeah. And they see Britain bringing them up and giving them a house.
Yeah, it is absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? And I mean, and there's no end to it, really. I mean, he's going to go to, Starmer's going to Brussels today. He was talking to Olaf Scholz over the weekend, who was down at Chequers. Supposedly they did some deal on immigration. I don't know what deal that was, because, I mean, Germany's got a bigger problem with migrants than we have. And they've been talking about closing their borders, which means if they do that, people will just bypass Germany and carry on through into France and then through into Britain, won't they?
Well, they would do if Germany was going to close its borders. But we saw how the European elites have kind of fought back against the issues of tighter controls on immigration in the European Union. We saw Olaf Scholz's party effectively lose a vote in Germany that put stronger conditions on criminality of illegal migrants, allowing the police to actually arrest more of them and deport them. Right. We watched in Italy as the courts once again overturned the Albanian deportation system and scheme that Meloni has put in place. And they allowed out in Sweden the 5 people who were accused of murdering the individual who burnt the Quran. Yeah. If those are the sorts of deals that Keir Starmer is agreeing with the European Union then we've got serious problems ahead in this country.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Apparently, as well, we've got new figures in the Telegraph today. Over half of all smoke boat arrival asylum applications are granted, which means that, you know, that's another great incentive, because they'll say there's a 50-50 chance that you'll actually get asylum. And even if you don't get asylum, they'll never be able to kick you out. Also, unlike most other European countries, including France and Germany, if we have people who are considered to be children because they're supposed to be under 18, they'll be given school places and housed by local councils rather than sent to migrant hotels. And we're not even allowed to test them to see whether or not they're actually children, because we've seen cases in the past of 24-year-olds, 34-year-olds. I think there was one 41-year-old who was claiming to be 16, right? We're not allowed to test them, but they do get medical tests in every other country in Europe. So again, and we're sort of behind the 8 ball here.
We are, and we're incentivising the people smugglers. You're right on that. I think it was something around 1,800 individuals who claimed asylum as children last year were found actually to be adults, and the Illegal Immigration Act brought in stronger controls that you could test them. Being the Conservatives, though, unfortunately, they never implemented it, so it gave the opportunity for the Labour Party to dispense with that amongst those conditions that you have mentioned at the beginning of the show. That's what they're going to change. They're not even going to test them. And so immediately we're going to have this same situation once more, where people who claim to be children to get better options and opportunities to stay here under the asylum application process will actually be found out to be adults, but we can't test them and we won't find them out quick enough. It'll only be when they do something dramatic in a school or elsewhere and somebody else points them out will they be able to be identified.
I know, absolute madness. Good to talk to you, Stephen. Thanks very much indeed. Stephen Wolfe, the Director for the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Coming up, we're going to be speaking to Richard Holden MP. He's the Shadow Paymaster General. He has put a series of questions to the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, about his voice coach and whether he broke the law during COVID times. Now, as you heard from various people over the show so far, Harry Cole amongst them, who said it might be that it's too long ago, might not be a big deal, but it might be a huge deal, because he's the guy that said basically that if he broke the law he would resign. Richard Lewis says this: King George VI had a voice coach which was made into the film The King's Speech. Maybe there's a future film about Starmer and his experience called something like The PM's Christmas Countdown. No, I think we could probably do a much better one than that, couldn't we? Let's get a voice note from Steve.
Good morning, how can I help you today? I need a voice coach. Aren't you breaking the rules? We're still in lockdown. The lockdowns only apply to right-wing people. Oh, well, take a seat. I'll be with you in 5 minutes. Oh, I'll soon have you talking exactly like me.
Brilliant. Steve, absolutely fantastic. I mean, exterminate all right-wingers. It's true. One from Neil says, you've got a listener in Switzerland as well. Brilliant. And a Maldives sunrise coming in from Sean, who's normally in Gloucester, but he's in the Maldives listening. Listen, morning glory, it's all over the place. It's morning in America, was what Ronald Reagan used to say. It's morning in Great Britain here. Coming up, Isabel Oakeshott as well in the next hour. I mean, what more could you want? Loads and loads of great stories. And Scotland wanting to ban cats. This is Talk.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in. An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the process, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia. These are the missiles.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's coming up to very nearly 3 minutes past 9, and we have got 4 glorious hours for you. We're into the last hour, obviously, 3 minutes past 9. Julia Hartley-Brewer coming up at 10 o'clock. She'll be looking into all manner of things. Keir Starmer is off to Brussels today to sell us out to the European Union, no doubt. Don't forget, this is a man who wanted a second referendum. He didn't like the result of the first one, and he fought tooth and nail, by the way, before that referendum in 2016 and after it to try and make sure that it wasn't properly implemented. You know, apparently Emmanuel Macron is going to tell him that Brexit hasn't worked. Well, you know, you might blame Keir Starmer as one of the reasons why it hasn't worked, one of the reasons why it hasn't been properly kind of, you know, put into force and put into action. We spoke to Reem Ibrahim this morning from the IEA. She said there are a myriad now of ridiculous EU directives which we have adopted, we've never got rid of. Well, maybe we should think about doing that right now. Lots of you getting in touch from all around the world. Got this from Mark, who's originally from Romford. He's currently in Bangkok. Listening to the show. Listen, it's all happening. Morning Glory is, of course, a worldwide phenomenon. Let's get a listing of worldwide phenomena because we've now got the greatest president in America, the 47th president, Donald Trump. He's bringing tariffs back. He's put them onto Canada. He's put them onto Mexico. He's put them onto China. And he's probably going to put them on to the EU as well. Let's have a listen.
You know, we have over a $300 billion deficit. They don't take our cars. They don't take our farm products. They take almost nothing. So the UK is way out of line, and we'll see the UK, but European Union is really out of line. UK is out of line, but I'm sure that one, I think that one can be worked out.
He thinks he can work something out with us, but if Starmer aligns himself too closely to the EU, it might not be the greatest idea he's ever had. Coming up, Richard Holden MP joins us, Shadow Paymaster General. He sent a letter to the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, asking him for specific answers to specific questions about a voice coach that he got during the COVID crisis back in 2024, during Tier 4 lockdown. This voice coach here, by the name of Leonie Mellinger, was pictured on Christmas Eve 2020 wearing a mask inside Labour HQ. Supposedly, that was given permission by the then leader of the opposition and the Labour Party because she was a key worker. The question is, was that actually against the rules? Because everyone can remember the Queen, of course, back at Prince Philip's funeral, who had to sit all alone in the Windsor Chapel where the funeral took place. And people are now asking the question, if only she had a voice coach, she could have had somebody sit with her, which is probably more true than it sounds. 5 minutes past 9, this indeed is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Let's go now straight away to Richard Holden, MP, Shadow Paymaster General, who's down in Westminster for us. Richard, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's been a glorious sunrise. The day has got plenty of exciting things to happen in it, perhaps. Keir Starmer's off to Brussels. You sent out a letter last night to the Prime Minister's office, which contained several what I would regard as pretty pertinent questions about this story of him and his voice coach. Have you had any answers yet?
No answers yet, Mike. I mean, the truth is that the Prime Minister's got a lot of questions to answer here. We all know that during the pandemic, he was absolutely all over everybody else for their potential breaches of the rules. I want some questions answered from Sir Keir about his potential breaches of the rules as well. When London was in Tier 4 lockdown on Christmas Eve in 2020, he had his voice coach with him in Labour HQ. Now, I can understand if you had as adenoidal nasal voice as Sir Keir has, that you would want a voice coach, and you may even consider them a key worker, but that wasn't in the rules at the time, Mike. In fact, it was very clear, and Labour acknowledge it themselves, because they also say, actually, this voice coach had been working with him remotely for quite a long time. So why on earth, at that point in time, did they think they had to have her in Labour HQ? I think there's a lot of questions around this, because it's not up to Sir Keir who a key worker is. Actually, that was defined by the government at the time, and it certainly didn't apply to voice coaches or to acting coaches, especially when you think all those drama students across the country, rather than actually in their universities or in their FE colleges, were actually at home themselves. So why would there be an exemption for the Leader of the Opposition?
Well, of course, the great thing about Sir Keir Starmer is that he's such a hypocrite that you can always find a piece of news or a clip from an earlier time which might embarrass him. This is him literally 5 days before Christmas Eve in 2020. Check it out.
It's very important that whatever the rules are, everybody follows them. So I say follow the government advice. Whatever tier you're in, follow the rules. It's very important that we all say that, the government and the opposition. Whenever you have a tiered system, you'll have different rules in different parts of the UK. It makes it more confusing. But I think overall, the public will be saying, just when we want certainty, just when we want leadership, we've got inconsistency, confusion.
See, it's very easy, Richard, isn't it, to play by the rules, and all you've got to do is follow them.
Well, that's what he said at the time, and it's very clear that, you know, when it was concerned that people hadn't followed the rules, he was the first jumping up and down asking for an investigation. In fact, you might remember he really backed a lady called Sue Gray to do an investigation, who later down the line became his own chief of staff before he fell out with her. Now, I think it's pretty clear, given there was an investigation by Sue Gray at that time, well, let's bring somebody back to do an investigation into Sir Keir Starmer. He should be the one actually leading the charge for an investigation into himself. If he's got nothing to hide, then let's see him actually get that information out there and prove it. I think these are really serious questions, because actually it's not so much about the one individual occurrence, it's about the way that Sir Keir Starmer behaves, it's about the way he treats everybody else as well, and it's about him taking the public for fools. I think these are big questions to answer for him, and I think he needs to get on with it as quickly as possible, because you know, when it comes down to it, trust is really important. He said it was his flagship thing to restore it. I think there are big questions to answer here, and I'm sure that your listeners and viewers do too.
Yeah, absolutely right. Well, they've all been very much following what happened at the weekend as well. This book that's come out called Get In, which paints a very curious picture of our Prime Minister, a man who apparently always wanted to be leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister, but he doesn't know why. A man who sort of thinks he's driving a train, but even his own people are saying he's like the guy that sits in front of the DLR. The Docklands Light Railway, for those of you who don't know, is an automatic train. They have a train driver that sits there not driving it in case something happens. But I mean, if he's not driving the train, who is?
Well, this is a very good question, and it feels like we're being driven off a cliff at the moment by Rachel Reeves and Labour's attitude to our economy, with job vacancies falling through the floor, with economic growth off the edge of a cliff, and now him kowtowing to the European Union, which we all know he didn't just not want to leave, he wanted to rejoin at the earliest opportunity. And you know what that is? We might talk about trade barriers and all that sort of thing and tariffs. What the customs union is essentially a tariff wall around the European Union. I don't think that we should be doing that. I want to be, I'm a bit of a free trader when it comes down to it. Obviously, I don't want to see dumping from the Chinese or something like that, so there should be a response, but I want to see Britain out into the world. We've got that free trade agreement with the EU. Let's go and get one with the US, just like we were negotiating that last time President Trump was in office. I think there's a big opportunity here for the UK. It's just whether or not Sir Keir Starmer seizes it, and I really fear that he's just not interested.
Absolutely right. One final one for you, Richard. He's off to Brussels today, presumably to try and re-establish whatever relationship he thinks we should have with the European Union. Are you worried he's going to give stuff away that we don't want to give away?
Look, I'm very worried on this. I think when it comes to fishing, which is only just coming properly back into our own hands, whether it comes to migration, which is coming back into the UK's hands, I really worry about what he is prepared to trade away. It is a big question here over what he's prepared to do. And given the way he's behaved in the past, I really don't. When it comes to other negotiations, you might remember the Chagos Islands currently happening in the background there. He's trying to give them away and pay £9 billion of our money to do it. It seems crazy. I don't trust this man to negotiate on our behalf any day of the week.
No, neither do I. Richard Holden, well played. Thank you very much indeed. Let us know when you get any answers on that letter, because we're very keen to find out what they have to say for themselves. Shadow Paymaster General written a letter to Keir Starmer asking for specific answers to specific questions, including one which says, does the Prime Minister believe that he broke the law? Let's talk now to Isabel Oakeshott, Talk's international editor. It turns out this woman, Leonie Mellinger, has acted next to Sir Patrick Stewart at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and Rick Mayall as well. She apparently first witnessed Keir Starmer giving a speech in Brighton years and years ago, and she described his performance as wooden. I'm not sure if she improved it at all, did she?
Well, that was exactly what I was going to say. I mean, yeah, his performance is still wooden. So whatever interventions that she has attempted to make don't seem to have had an awful lot of effect, do they? I mean, I would actually say she kind of is a key worker. I mean, the whole nation would benefit greatly from her efforts. If they were actually going to change his voice, we wouldn't have to be subjected to it. My goodness, what an impact that could have on our national health, not to have to listen to that hideous, robotic, dismal, depressing sounding voice. I would say that actually almost does qualify as a key worker. But at that time, he wasn't the Prime Minister, and technically, I'm sure rules were broken. This whole thing raises so many questions, doesn't it? I mean, what on earth was he doing, having a voice coach around on Christmas Eve? Who does that? I mean, has he got nothing better to do? Is he not wrapping presents, eating sausage rolls and all the things that normal people do?
Well, probably not, because he's not normal, is he? I mean, the picture that's painted in this book, Get In, which is a great sort of introduction to politics and to Labour politics in particular, because some of the revelations that have come out over the weekend in the Sunday Times, that Morgan McSweeney and also Sue Gray were sort of at each other's throats, barely speaking to one another. They had to put them in separate offices before they even got into power. And then when they got into power, it got even worse. The idea that Keir Starmer is this kind of loner, a guy who doesn't like meeting people, apparently suffered from stage fright, which is one of the reasons they brought this woman in to try and help him speak, and sort of is a very the picture is painted of a very odd man.
He's just not up to it. It's very clear to me that he cannot survive as Prime Minister until the next election. Clearly, the next election is a very, very long time away, but it's inconceivable to me that this guy is going to continue leading his party and into any kind of major electoral test. It's everyone around him must be able to see that this isn't working. It was obvious before he even became Prime Minister. You could see it in those TV debates he did during the election, that he's missing some quite major elements of what it takes to be an engaging and impressive politician. He's just not up to it.
Well, let's have a look, right? I've got a couple of clips here. The first one is from 2017, when he was campaigning. And actually, you might argue that he's actually less wooden in 2017 than he is now.
Here we are in Kentish Town, canvassing in the rain, and Owen's out with us this afternoon, which has meant we've got lots more people than we might otherwise have had, which has been fantastic. So it may be raining, we're out canvassing. Good team.
There we were in happier times with Owen Jones, who's all smiles, who now hates him and won't even admit to being a Labour voter anymore. But then in 2024, this is what he turned into.
Fixing the foundations is like finding damp in your wall.
I mean, that's possibly the worst analogy I think I've ever found anywhere, you know.
It just is dire, isn't it? I'm struck by how much he's aged, I suppose,
Yes.
that we all have. But, you know, I think it has gone downhill. I really do. I think he's thinking too hard. It sort of reminds me a bit, actually, of when Gordon Brown, when one of his coaches or his focus group said that he doesn't smile enough.
Right.
Do you remember?
Yes.
And he started doing these really weird kind of rictus
Yes.
fake things, and it was worse than what there was before. I think that maybe Keir Starmer's just overthinking things and should try to just be a bit more natural, or maybe the raw material just isn't there.
Right.
I don't think he's going to change, is he? Just
No,
my God!
I don't see how he can. I mean, one of the more delicious revelations from the book is that Tony Blair still refers to Gordon Brown as a nutcase, because Tony Blair was trying to describe what Keir Starmer's like. He said, well, at least he's not a nutcase like Gordon Brown.
I mean, I think I'd go with it along with nutcase at this point. At least it'd be a bit more interesting. I mean, you couldn't get any greyer or duller or more miserable. And one wonders how he's going to be cutting an impressive figure when he goes over to Brussels to try to, oh, well, as he puts it, reset the relationship. The last thing we need is him going cap in hand, you know.
No, I know.
Suggestion that he acknowledges that Brexit has been a failure would be absolutely dynamite amongst British voters who only blame him for the failure.
Well, quite. But you can't really imagine him sitting in a room with all of those, you know, burgers and making out that Brexit was a success, can you? You just can't see him making the arguments. He doesn't believe it.
No, he's not going to do that. He's going to try to say as little as possible, I suppose. But the very fact that he's there, the first Prime Minister to go to an EU summit since we left the EU, just shows that we know he doesn't believe in it. But the last thing we need at this point is more visa schemes and more concessions. I don't believe we need a defence and security pact, which is one of his missions. I mean, the pact is called NATO. It works really, really well. And we don't want to cast back the clock to pre-Brexit times when there was genuine talk of an EU army that Britain be part of. Barely got enough of our own army, let alone, you know, putting any resources into some kind of weirdo Brussels defence thing.
Yeah, I know. Sounds very weird. Now, we've got a little exclusive we're going to talk about now, Isabel. This is a reform scenario, basically. Tell us about Richard Tice's trip up to York, because this is really quite a remarkable story that I think people will be open-mouthed about when they hear about it.
Well, it was a really big weekend for reform. They had a big rally up north, and after the rally, the deputy leader of the party went up to York University to give a talk to their newly formed Reform Society. And it's quite a big deal that there are now universities setting up Reform Societies. This is a whole new thing, and I think points to the support for the party amongst young people. Yeah. The scale of the protest that was organised against Richard Tice's contribution up there, against his visit, I mean, the amount of resources that had to be devoted to dealing with this protest. First of all, the venue had to be changed multiple times. Secondly, he needed a police escort, so serious was the threat of disruption. Thirdly, parliamentary security, whose job it is to protect MPs, had to provide 2 personnel to make sure that he was safe. And you had all these chanting Muppets outside. I mean, I can't think what else to call them. I mean, if people look carefully at those signs, there are signs, placards being held up which can't even spell the word fascist. I mean, it's completely illiterate.
Yeah.
And ranting students who had been basically whipped into a frenzy by organisers who distributed material advising them on how they should blend in, they should all wear masks. I can see someone defied that order at the front of the protest there. You know, York Migrant Solidarity Group, York Celiac Society. What was the other one, Mike, about animal creatures?
The Creatures on Campus Society or something, right?
And there's like a dozen organisations from York University that all coalesced to rant about racism and fascism. Not one of them, I suspect, remotely capable of describing just why they think reform stands for any of those things.
No, exactly right. And I mean, the thing that's interesting is that the reform have now started to get themselves into universities and get young people interested in supporting them. And that, I think, is a great thing, because I'm surprised in a way that some of these universities aren't trying to ban them even from having a reform society. But I think we've got a listing of some of the other organisations as well that were backing this. But the serious point about it is the cost to the taxpayer, because of the sort of, you'd have to say, I mean, they've had these conversations in America, haven't they, between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris when they were campaigning against each other, that he was saying, you know, one of the reasons he believed that so much vitriol against him was drilled up was because it was stoked by the Democrats. You know, they talk about somebody being evil and racist and a bigot, and what happens in America? Somebody takes a pot shot at you, you know, and the restrictions now and the important need for protection for the 5 Reform MPs is actually costing the taxpayer quite a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really serious dimension to it. I was surprised that essentially the public purse, the taxpayer, had to provide security for Richard at this event, because it was obviously a party political event, and in general, the taxpayer doesn't fund party political things, quite rightly so. But at the same time, the parliamentary authorities have a duty to protect MPs, and I think we all agree that's necessary, unfortunately. In the tragedies that we've had with David Amos and Joe Cox and Stephen Timms, who was very, very nearly murdered. And this is where we're at. You know, security has massively ramped up for Nigel Farage. People who watch Reform's rallies may notice that. You know, you can actually see it on the screen. You can see how many more people now have to surround him. And this is really serious stuff. And the irony here is that these hard left groups, because that's what they are, you know, many of these are very strong pro-Palestinian campaigners. They're vegan societies. They've got all the socialist worker groups were also involved in the York University thing. They like to rant about against spewing such vitriol against politicians who are actually just voicing mainstream views. They are the very thing that they accuse those on the right of being.
They absolutely are, and it's good that we can highlight these stories, because they're the things that kind of go beneath the radar, because of course you won't get anybody at The Guardian wanting to write about, you know, Reform MPs having to have security, because it would be against their principles. But listen, good to talk to you. Isabel Oakeshott, thank you very much indeed. Talks International Editor. Let's get a voice note from Bob.
Morning, Mike. It's Bob here from Kings Lynn. I'm absolutely seething, well, at the whole government situation at the moment, but Starmer's attitude to COVID, my dad died during COVID, and he was jaunting. Now, am I being naive when I say that couldn't somebody actually bring a private prosecution against this man for that lie, and potentially for every other lie that he's told that breaks the law? Thanks, Mike. Great show.
Bob, sorry to hear about your dad. And yeah, I mean, listen, I don't know what the rules would be around a private prosecution of a politician for lying. You might get a judge that would say, well, what did you expect them to do or say? But there's something wrong with the system that allows for a politician like Keir Starmer, when he was leader of the opposition, to say one thing and do another, to promise one thing as a leader of the opposition, come into power as Prime Minister and do another. You know, it's called lying. It's not called anything else. The question is he an inveterate liar? Is he a compulsive liar? Is he lying just because he doesn't realise he's lying? I don't know, but it's not good, is it? This is Talk.
I don't think this is about bigotry. I don't think it's about racism. It's certainly not about immigration per se. It's about the lack of control, and constantly, certainly the Tory government have a lot to answer for here. But and now obviously the Labour government, they are just completely ignoring the British people. So I think there's a crisis in democracy. There was a poll just this week, which you might have seen, Peter, which said something like over 40% of young people would like a dictator.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:28. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. There's a big story coming this week on Lucy Letby. Tomorrow, there's going to be a press conference held at which some evidence is going to be presented by several people, including David Davis, MP, about why fresh doubts are being raised over the conviction of Lucy Letby. David Rose is here. He's investigations editor at Unheard. David, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. This is quite a development, isn't it? It's about a scientist in the USA whose apparent sort of, unbeknownst to him, I think, evidence was used to convict Lucy Letby, and he's now kind of recanted that, and he's going to come to this press conference, I believe, and explain why he doesn't think his testimony, as it was taken, should ever have been used.
Yeah, that's correct. He produced a paper some years ago. He's an eminent paediatrician and researcher in the United States. And this paper looked at the effects of what is known as air embolism. That is the injection of air into a neonatal baby's bloodstream or possibly via the stomach, which can be fatal. And the prosecution expert at her trial, the main expert, Doe Evans, claimed that this was the method that she used to harm the babies of which she was convicted of murder and attempted murder. The researcher in question, Shu Lee, has now assembled an international panel of experts who have gone through all the medical notes of the babies who figured in her trials. She was, of course, retried on one of attempted murder last year. And they've come to the conclusion that no crime was committed, that there is no evidence at all of foul play. Now, this builds on earlier analysis by two eminent paediatricians in the UK, one of whom I've spoken to at great length, Dr. Svelena Dimitrova from a hospital in Brighton, and they have already concluded, and David Davis said this in the House of Commons some weeks ago, that there is strong evidence that doctors who went on to accuse Letby of murdering these babies had in fact done things that were clinically dangerous, basically serious clinical errors. Perhaps the most egregious case is that of a baby known as Baby O, where a doctor who, as I say, went on to accuse Lucy Letby was found, or can be seen from the child's medical notes, to have in fact stabbed this child in the liver inadvertently when he put a needle into the child's abdomen in the wrong place, and this caused severe internal bleeding, which must have been at least a contributory factor in the child's death.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the difficulty, I suppose, with all of this is whether or not the judicial system, as such as it is, would allow for another trial, because that seems to have been the impediment in the past. And what makes the people who are taking part in this press conference tomorrow think that might change?
Well, can I also draw your attention to the investigation that we published on Unheard by me at the weekend, because what this shows is a major departure from the evidence that was heard at the trial. The the prosecution claimed at the trial, largely on the basis of analysis by the prosecution expert Dowie Evans, that whenever a suspicious incident took place that either harmed a child or led to the child's death, Lucy Letby was on duty at that time, at the time where he deemed the suspicious incident took place. What I published in Unheard is evidence that when he first conducted an analysis and met the police over 2 days in October 2017, he identified 10 occasions when he thought suspicious occurrences had taken place, in which, in fact, it then transpired that Lucy Letby was not on duty. Now, at the trial, the prosecution presented a chart showing a row of X's. She was on duty every time a suspicious occurrence occurred. If you look at what we published in Unheard, you'll see there's, if you like, a revised list based on Evans' initial analysis, which shows 10 gaps, 10 periods when he said harmful incidents occurred where she wasn't at the hospital. And some of these are set out in some detail. The deliberate removal of a tube, a catheter going into a child's navel, an attempt to smother a child with a hand placed over her face. Well, Lucy Letby wasn't on duty at those times. So guess what? We never heard about those incidents during the trial. Now, as to your point about the difficulty of getting the Court of Appeal to reopen the case, both on the basis of the flaws we published in Unheard and on the basis of new analysis of medical notes, the great difficulty is that over a number of years, the Court of Appeal has shown itself to be very resistant to the idea of accepting evidence that the defence could, at least in theory, have adduced at trial. Now, this contrasts with the position in earlier years. I've investigated a number of miscarriages of justice in the course of my career. One of them was the Tottenham Three, the case of the 3 men convicted of murdering PC Keith Blakelock during the Tottenham riot in 1985. Now, when that case was referred back to the Court of Appeal by the Home Secretary, in those days there was no Criminal Cases Review Commission, the body that now does this. It had to be the Home Secretary who asked the Court of Appeal to look at a case for a subsequent occasion after a first appeal had been lost. At that appeal, one of the 3, a man called Mark Braithwaite, had been convicted when evidence that was that basically suggested he was innocent could have been available, but wasn't. And so when the defence at the appeal asked for the evidence that suggested he was innocent to be adduced, the judge in charge of the case, one of the 3 judges, Lord Justice Farquharson, said, yes, it is right, of course, that this evidence could, in theory, have been produced at the trial. In some circumstances, or even in normal circumstances, we would therefore be resistant to the idea of hearing it now. But, he went on to say, justice requires, that was the phrase he used, justice requires that it should be admitted now. Now, I think the problem is for Lucy Letby now is that since that time, that was in 1991, the Court of Appeal has become much more resistant to the idea of allowing, if you will, a second bite at the cherry. But if ever justice requires that fresh evidence that could in theory have been adduced in her case should be adduced now, well, it's hard to come up with a stronger set of circumstances, given that she is serving 15 whole life sentences, 15 sentences of life without parole, and she's only 35 years old. So David Davis, who has been campaigning solidly on this for some months now, is convinced that eventually this case will be recognised as a miscarriage of justice and her convictions will be quashed. Possibly she'll be ordered to have a retrial, possibly she'll simply have the convictions quashed as unsafe and be set free. He fears that this may take 20 years, and I share those fears. But I do believe that if ever there is a case for the Court of Appeal showing a new flexibility and being able to hear the new medical evidence that suggests that no crimes may have been committed at all, and the fact that the prosecution case that she was present on every occasion when something untoward happened, well, this evidence needs to be heard and aired and tested. And if it stands up, then, of course, she should have her convictions quashed and be released.
Yes, absolutely right. Incredible work. David, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. David Rose, Investigations Editor at Unheard there. It is incredible, this story. I've started again talking to Peter Hitchens about it months and months and months and months ago. And Peter Hitchens is not one of those who thinks that she's maybe innocent, but he just thinks that there is certainly enough evidence now to retry her, given that so much of the evidence presented turns out to be incorrect, as David Rose's investigation has shown. Remarkable stuff. Let's get a voice note from Tony.
Morning, Mike. Tony from Buckinghamshire. I'm just sitting here thinking the audacity of this Keir Starmer. Not only did he make untruths in the past, he doesn't even acknowledge that he broke them promises and apologise for them and possibly offer a reason why they've changed. He just goes into complete denial over and over again.
He really does, and he's always very vociferous about it, isn't he? Like the not a penny more speech about council tax. I'd like to know why it has taken so long to find out about the voice coach, says Michelle. Any journalist worth their salt should have picked up on this when Starmer was attacking Boris. Yeah, but the trouble is they weren't looking for it. And like a lot of these political books, stories come out in those books because of things that authors are able to find out about, as if old-fashioned journalism has kind of died a death. Keith in Durham says this: why was it necessary for Starmer to have a voice coach tutoring on Christmas Eve 2020 during lockdown? Moreover, who paid for this voice coach? Well, that is a very good question. I'm assuming it was probably the Labour Party, but you know what? Maybe it was Lord Ali. Who knows? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 9:40. We're here with you right here until 10 o'clock. Just before that, Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along. Winston says this: hi, Mike, if this is all true, he should ask for a refund. He is freaking useless. He can't even say secretary. He says secretary. What a plonker. That's true, actually. I think there are several words that he can't say. Poor old Keir Starmer. Let's just have a quick flash of him talking about sausages, shall we?
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
And who better to talk to sausages about than James Chiavarini, director of Il Portico, London's oldest family-run restaurant. James, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too. I mean, we're not going to worry talking about Keir Starmer and his voice coach. I mean, it doesn't bear thinking about. But what does bear thinking about is this weird story about this unprovoked attack on a waitress that happened actually a year ago. Finally, the police got around to arresting this guy. We're not going to name anybody in it because there's arrest going on. But I mean, this is extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, it's one of those jobs, front-facing, public-facing jobs like this. Nobody really knows what's going on here, but what we can see is that the police didn't do much about it for nearly a year. This guy basically slaps the waitress in the face with a plate. I mean, do you ever? I mean, have you ever encountered any kind of weirdness and rudeness like that from staff at your from customers at your restaurants? I mean,
never to this level, Mike. But what it does show is it does show, unfortunately, that it's taken a year for this story to even for the police to even get this person. I mean, look, he's on CCTV. It's clearly an unprovoked attack. She had a duty. You know, her employers have a duty of care. And the police have a duty of care towards that girl to make sure that she can go to work without fear of being unprovokedly attacked in the face with a bloody plate. I mean,
it's extraordinary, isn't it? And I mean, it's only because she kind of basically sort of agitated for herself on social media, because she went to the police and she said she was grossly let down because they basically didn't really do anything. They failed to find out who the person was, even though it was all caught on video. We've actually blocked out their faces so you can't see. But it's really, I mean, I don't know what the police would be doing in a situation like that, because if you call the police, somebody's been assaulted, normally speaking, they arrest someone straight away.
Well, you would like to think so, wouldn't you? And it just makes people believe that things like assault and phone theft and other things like that, which you know are effectively legal on the streets of London, because if nobody follows up on these cases, then it just lets down the trust that we have in our institutions even further.
Well.
And, you know, this girl was just doing her job. It's a tough job working on the floor in a restaurant. I've done it every day since I was 13 years old. It is a physically demanding job. And if I was her, if that had happened in my restaurant and the police hadn't done anything, I would have seriously looked into bringing a private prosecution against this guy.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Because, I mean, there's a very thin line, it seems to me, between civilised society and complete sort of social breakdown. You know, and there are certainly parts of London now where, you know, I'm very careful about what I'm doing when I'm walking there. I don't get my phone out anymore. You know, I wouldn't wear a watch that was expensive enough to be stolen. You know, I wouldn't carry an expensive-looking bag or buy anything expensive and carry it in a bag. You know, which is a really horrible place, I think, for London to be right now.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Mike. But I mean, this is the failings of the institutions, and it's not just the Met Police as well. Because I mean, you know, it's also the CPS and its other institutions which don't bring things to prosecute because the courts aren't open. You know, they're only open for 4 days out of the 7, and even then they're only open part time. So the courts are all backlogged and everything's woefully underfunded and everything else. So I mean, I think we have a tendency to lay the proportion of the blame at the foot of the Met Police, but when I've certainly had incidences where I've reported to the Met Police and we found the guy, we've had DNA evidence, we've had CCTV evidence when things have happened in my restaurant, never this bad, the police have always said, you know, we brought it to the CPS, but the CPS don't want to bring a charges. So,
right, because they don't.
In that case, they
hide behind it, don't they? There's no likelihood of a successful prosecution. Well, you know, we'll be the judge of that, won't we? I mean, once you have the prosecution, then you can judge it. You can't just go, oh, I don't think that would work, so we're not going to bother doing it.
Yeah, I mean, and we've seen that with companies like Marks and Spencer's and Waitrose now. I'm not sure about Waitrose, but I'm definitely sure there was a story in Marks and Spencer's last year about bringing forward private prosecutions now. Because if they say, well, if you know, if we can't rely on the institutions to do the job that our taxpayers' money goes towards, then we'll just have to take on it ourselves, just like private medicine or private health or private schooling.
Yeah, we've got a guy that we talk to an awful lot, Mike Neville, who involves himself in all of that. He's a former Scotland Yard detective, and he basically has now got a company that he helps shops, particularly victims of shoplifting, to go after people because it's all on CCTV and the cops don't want to know.
Yeah, exactly. So this is basically where we're heading as a society, isn't it? And you can make the argument that, you know, shoplifting is people might say on the streets, oh, why does it affect me? But it will affect you when the fabric of society starts to break down on the streets of London and things like this happen. Things like this happen because of a sense of entitlement. This man slapped this woman, apart from the fact that he's clearly slightly deranged, obviously. But he did it because he knew that he could get away with it. Because he's probably sitting there thinking, well, no one's going to care, no one's going to stop me. She's just a waitress, she's just a blue collar worker doing a blue collar job, and it's disgraceful. You can't treat people like that. It doesn't matter who they are.
Exactly right. And let me just ask you about the economy generally, James, because you know you own a couple of restaurants. You're very successful. You've been in London a long time. Come April, you're going to be having to pay probably more money, minimum wage wise, to your employees. You're going to have to pay more money for national insurance. How's that going to affect your business?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. I mean, to be honest with you, most people in London now, everyone pays London living wage, so the minimum wage isn't going to make that much of a difference, other than it's going to be an increased tax burden. What is going to make a difference is the national insurance contributions, and they know this, but frankly, they don't really care, because as a restaurant, as any old school analog business that employs an awful lot of people, there aren't that many efficiencies, there aren't that many tax loops that we can benefit from that big companies can. So we can't outsource anything to China, we can't outsource anything to offshore. Everything is made in-house, everything is done the old school old-fashioned way, and we employ an awful lot of people to do that.
Right.
So you'd like to think that
You
the
can't
government would be
you
on
can't
your
do
side.
your job from home either.
You can't do your job from home. You've got to go to work. You've got to show up. You've got to make the food. You've got to serve the customers. All those links in those chains involves a person, right? And the thing is that if you want those people employed, and if you want them people gainfully employed, and you want taxes paid, and you want suppliers paid, and you want VAT paid, you've got to cut these businesses. You've got to cut these businesses a break, because otherwise, they're just gonna. What are they gonna do? They're just gonna go under. Or they're gonna stop employing people, and they're just gonna go under.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, we wish you well, James. I'm sure you'll find some incredibly clever way to make business work even better for you. James Chiavarini, director of Il Portico, London's oldest family-run restaurant. And during COVID, one of the things that James did was he made pizzas and gave away for free to people who were struggling with their finances, families in West London who really didn't really have much ability to get out and about and get food. So he's a great man. Lots of you are getting in touch. Loads of you want to talk about the voice coach, of course. Reg says, I'm off to America. I've had enough of this country. Brian's in Lanzarote. He says it will be the biggest slap in the face of democracy if Starmer takes us anywhere near the EU. And one from Doc saying, no, sorry, we've done that one already. One here from somebody who doesn't give a name. Mike, why would the EU be prepared to accept the UK back, knowing reform would take us out again in 2029? Well, the funny thing is that people don't see reform as anything other than a nuisance. I mean, I know that Keir Starmer is now starting to treat reform as the main opposition, but they're a bit like the Americans with Donald Trump. They don't think they're going to win. They didn't think Donald Trump was going to win in 2016. They were really shocked when he did. And they certainly didn't think he'd ever run again when he lost in 2020. And now in 2024, they didn't think he was going to win either. So they didn't take it seriously enough. And Stuart says this morning, Mike, I think this voice coach's career will have gone down the tubes. I mean, if you were a voice coach, would you advertise the fact that you'd coach Keir Starmer? Fixing the foundations. We don't need to do the clips anymore. I'll just do them here. Steve says this, maybe two-tier would have been better off with a truth coach. That would have been good. Let's hear from Claire.
Sorry, Mike. I think that's being too kind to Starmer. He is lying. He knows he's lying. He lied about what he was going to do before the election, and he's lied since. He doesn't like this country. He's a Europhile, a globalist. He doesn't want borders. I mean, excuses. Sorry, he's a lawyer. You might think he's thick, but he's not. Lawyer, liar. Sounds the same, doesn't it? Lawyer, liar. What are you, a lawyer or a liar? Or both? Or neither? Who can say? Big story on the front page of the Times today. I've got to mention this because it's important. Potholes, right? £14.4 billion worth of a problem for Britain's roads, frustrating motorists. It now turns out that engineers think that they've got self-healing roads. So they're going to actually get asphalt that fixes itself. Grows, if you like. A bit like concrete. Ring any bells? I'm so far ahead of my time, sometimes it's frightening. How about this from Tony? He says, President Trump will impose tariffs on the EU. Lucky for us, we left. And Ben says, maybe he could use that self-healing tarmac to add another runway to Heathrow. Just like that. This is Talk.
length runway in Britain was built in the 1940s. No progress in 80 years. A third runway could increase potential GDP by 0.43% by 2050.
Could a new runway be built that abides with carbon targets, concerns around noise pollution and concerns around air pollution?
That a third runway at Heathrow would unlock further growth, boost investment, increase exports and make the UK more open and more connected.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:54. Got this from Dave. Mike, I'm in an Austrian hospital after a ski accident. The NHS should send a team over here to see how it's supposed to be done. Booked in at 4 p.m, operated on at midnight in a double room with ensuite, doctors and physio daily, and they want to talk to you. Nurses constant and friendly. This place really works well. I'm looking forward to getting home to Weymouth, but worry about where two-tier Keith is taking us. Keep up the great work. And George says in Birmingham, morning Mike, a bright start to a Monday. Speaking of freeing the hostages, Starmer has reminded me that I have some in the fridge and I'll be freeing them into the frying pan. Very good. Let's get a voice note from Dave.
Good morning, mate. Dave Northdown. I see that man, that leader of the UK, Keir Starmer. Well, he's away to the European Union to talk with Brussels again. This guy is going to betray the trust and the vote of 17.2 million people. Even those people who voted Brexit will understand that he's betraying the country and he's becoming a dictator.
He certainly is. Very well put and nicely, shall we say, elongated in the way that you said it. We've got plenty to do before Julie Hartley-Brewer gets here very shortly. One from Dennis in Melton Mowbray says, if you want a clip of Starmer from years ago, just watch the Smash adverts from the 70s. And then we smashed them all to bits, fixing the foundations, you know, the sort of thing. Earlier we spoke to Shadow Paymaster General Richard Holden about the questions he has for Keir Starmer, because for those of you just joining us, believe it or not, it turns out revelations in this new book are called Get In, about Labour and about Starmer, saying he used a voice coach during the pandemic.
We all know that during the pandemic, he was absolutely all over everybody else for their potential breaches of the rules. I want some questions answered from Sir Keir about his potential breaches of the rules as well. When London was in Tier 4 lockdown on Christmas Eve in 2020, he had his voice coach with him in Labour HQ. Now, I can understand if you had as adenoidal nasal voice as Sir Keir has, that you would want a voice coach, and you may even consider them a key worker, but that wasn't in the rules at the time, Mike. In fact, it was very clear, and Labour acknowledge it themselves, because they also say, actually, this voice coach had been working with him remotely for quite a long time. So why on earth, at that point in time, did they think they had to have her in Labour HQ? I think there's a lot of questions around this, because it's not up to Sir Keir who a key worker is. Actually, that was defined by the government at the time, and it certainly didn't apply to voice coaches or to acting coaches, especially when you think all those drama students across the country, rather than actually in their universities or in their FE colleges, were actually at home themselves. So why would there be an exemption for the Leader of the Opposition? In fact, you might remember he really backed a lady called Sue Gray to do an investigation, who later down the line became his own Chief of Staff before he fell out with her. Now, I think it's pretty clear, given there was an investigation by Sue Gray at that time, well, let's bring somebody back to do an investigation into Sir Keir Starmer. He should be the one actually leading the charge for an investigation into himself. If he's got nothing to hide, then let's see him actually get that information out there and prove it. I think these are really serious questions, because actually it's not so much about the one individual occurrence, it's about the way that Sir Keir Starmer behaves, it's about the way he treats everybody else as well. And It's about him taking the public for fools. I think these are big questions to answer for him, and I think he needs to get on with it as quickly as possible, because you know, when it comes down to it, trust is really important. He said it was his flagship thing to restore it. I think there are big questions to answer here, and I'm sure that your listeners and viewers do too.
Richard Holden there talking about the letter that he sent to the Prime Minister with some requiring some answers as to what he was doing and whether he thought he broke the law. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here. You'll probably have a view on this, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, you know how I felt about, you know, birthday cake and Boris. No.
Yeah.
I don't think this is an issue. I really don't think this is an issue.
Well, I think, like everything with Starmer, though, it depends
the rules
on
what
he did.
And there were loads of little...
But don't forget, this is a guy who kept banging on about how you have to abide by the rules. That makes it an issue for me.
Yeah. I think most people, right now, as a he didn't make the rules, he supported the rules. He'd still be in lockdown right now if it was up to Keir Starmer.
Exactly right.
He really would. I mean, I'm not even joking when I say that. Yeah. For me, the big issue is cozying up with the EU. I woke up this morning and went, are you beep kidding me? I mean, genuinely, they desperately want to get back into the EU.
Yeah.
Emmanuel Macron saying, oh, this is proof that Brexit has failed. I mean,
how about France failing?
I mean, mate, you've just had an election that you've lost. Shush.
Right.
You know, zip it,
also,
mate.